I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's April 9th, 2018. It's now 4 p.m. And as we look around the table, Councilman Cip will not be here, and Wally is coming. She's going to be a little bit late. So we're just going to start. But before we do, the city manager would like to present to us. All right, so we're going to start with her, kind of alter the items. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The preparation of the budget is one of the most important tasks performed each year, and the review and adoption of the budget is also one of the most important policy decisions that you make as an elected official in the best interest of our community. The fiscal year 19 budget is a product of collaboration between the City Council, city management, department directors, and staffs. The fiscal year 2019 budget highlights, I just wanted to recap a number of the items that you've had in your packets, but the recommended budget of $328.3 million before carryovers is balanced and sustainable within our 5-year forecast. Over the past month since we first discussed the budget, we have some better numbers and information, and just want to point out it is a fluid process as we lead up to the tentative budget as we get better information. You'll see that steady growth of both one-time and ongoing revenues has resulted in a proposed budget with controlled expenditure growth. The development of the budget relied heavily upon council input and our recently adopted strategic plan. Funding is included for the following items directly out of the strategic plan to include taking care of our workforce with pay increases for all employees, the biannual employee survey, the bike and pedestrian project study, website redesign, the recreation campus, a special events coordinator with 2 new special events, the EMR fire station operations, surface water treatment plant, the financial system implementation project, and fully funded asset management plans. This proposed budget does authorize the addition of 29 new FTE employees, bringing our total FTE count to 642, including part-time employees, while maintaining our employee per 1,000 residents count below 8. Although that does sound like a lot, many of them are funded by non-general fund sources, such as 14 of these positions are to staff the EMR fire station over 1 year in advance of the anticipated late fall opening to ensure that all staff are onboarded and fully trained. 100% of the operational costs of this station will be covered by Newland through fiscal year 2023. The proposed budget does also add an additional school resource officer to the police department, bringing our total SRO unit size to 5. Although not included in the budget because we're still working out the details, we do anticipate that 50% of the cost of that SRO will come from the Agua Fria School District. 5 of the other positions are funded outside of the general fund in areas such as water, wastewater, and sanitation. And details of all of the positions and the crucial services they'll provide will be discussed as we go through the recommended budget. The budget also funds $155 million in capital projects in addition to the projects which are currently funded and underway. And the only projects that are included in this budget are ones that are fully scoped and realistic with costs and achievable timelines. And any project that did not meet the criteria does not have any additional funding at this time. Our top priority moving into the next year is to develop a fully funded and fully deliverable 5-year CIP for adoption with next year's budget. So as we go along this evening, if there's a logical breaking point, we'll stop and ask for questions. And our intent is to address the budget holistically at first and then to address by department. And specific supplemental capital or project questions should be asked when we get to that responsible department because we will go through those department by department. We'll only have the department directors come up if it's something that Lori cannot address. And then we have 2 evenings scheduled for the budget discussions. We don't have a natural stopping part tonight. We're not going to get to a slide and say that's it for this evening. Kind of want to just feel how far we go and find a natural breaking point for this evening. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to our budget manager, Lori Wiggenroth.
And before you start, tonight this is going to be a conversation. We're not going to have you listen to a number of things before you comment. So get your pens out, and get ready to ask your questions. So as we go along, when it's a natural way to break or you really have a question before she goes on, please notify me and let's get the question out and get the answer. Okay? Everybody understand? Sorry, but we're going to do it differently than we normally do because this is extremely important, and it's not a time for us to forget what that question was when we heard some of the information. So you're on.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm more than happy to go about that way. I think it is the best way for us all learn what's going on and make sure we understand. So
And let me announce who you are for the people that might be listening to this. So we have Lori Wigenroth, our Finance Manager, Budget and Research, will be presenting.
All righty. So we do have this, as mentioned previously, planned over 2 days. So there's a lot of material here. So I thought I'd just start with kind of an overview of how we're going to proceed. We're going to start by talking about the financial policies. We're going to provide some information on their relative compliance within the recommended budget. And then we're going to start with an overview of the overall budget, and then we'll work our way down into the details. With regard to the general fund, we'll also provide an overview of 5-year forecast, and then give you a little bit more information on the 5-year CIP process that we're going through and a simple overview of that. And then we'll also walk through the department budgets and talk about where we go from here. So with that, we'll move to the financial policies, and I will try to refer to the materials that you received as we go through the slides. And so the financial policies, if you have the document, the printed document, are behind the second sheet of orange paper. And through that document, we have gone through and identified, we've identified the measure, the results that the city manager's recommended FY19 budget, how it compares to the financial policy. And then there are a couple recommended revisions to the policy. Again, this is the big, these are they kind of outline the assumptions that we've made in preparing the city manager's budget that would require a change in the financial policies. So with that said, the financial policies, and just make sure I didn't skip a slide here. Oops. Is this working? Oh, no. There we go. That was kind of scary. So the financial policy, there's one key change that is assumed in preparing the city manager's recommended budget. When we met with you in March, there was a great deal of conversation about the construction sales tax, and that because of the way reporting has been done on sales tax in the past, that we have in effect been reliant on construction sales tax to support the ongoing budget. And at that time, we were recommending a $5 million shift of construction sales tax to the ongoing category. Based on the feedback we heard, we've revised that to recommending that we use $4.5 million a year of construction sales tax as ongoing revenue. And so that is a proposed revision to the budget policy 1D. The related change is there is also a number of debt-related policies, and one of them has to do with the ratio of ongoing revenues to debt service. And so that one, we are also recognizing that the $4.5 million construction sales tax would be included in calculating that particular compliance with that particular policy. Something's not right about that one. Let's see if it's we've got an upside down slide. I don't know.
I hope that's not a bad omen here.
I don't know, but it's also not moving forward. So I don't know if the mouse will work here.
You want us to stand on our head. Come on.
So I will.
I can read it, so there's a problem.
Oh, jeez.
I will. Yeah, this tool is not working. Let's see if this tool will work. Neither tool is working, so I will tell you what's on the next slide, and maybe someone can help kind of figure out what to do about the slides moving forward. But the financial policies in your document, we are in compliance with all of the financial policies as they are laid out. I will call to your attention, there is the debt management policy, which is debt management policy H, is that measure of 3 years history of revenue against debt service payments. It references the general fund debt service. If you consider the general fund only debt service, we are well within that policy. But for full disclosure, we've gone ahead because it is ultimately funded by the general fund. We've identified that if you include the ballpark debt at its current level, at the full debt service payments that we're now at, we are slightly above the 10% that policy calls for at 10.7%. Okay.
Joe?
I like the full disclosure on the debt about the ballpark. And the only reason why I like that full disclosure is in the future, and again, I'm not a big proponent of using general fund for debt services anyway, but it is what it is. So in the future, if there's any other proposals and they see that, maybe you will refrain from using general fund debt service to move forward. The other thing for the record, and again, this is no news to anybody on here, I think we're actually not in compliance with the spirit of the enterprise fund being self-sufficient, the spirit. Now, I know why we did it, or the majority of the council voted for it, but my personal opinion, it's bad policy to tax somebody outside the city's service area, especially going through with property taxes, when we have multiple water companies, when there are viable options that are reasonable to pay for that debt service. That's my own personal opinion. I know it differs from the others, but I just think it's bad policy doing that, since the ones outside the city are also paying for all the capital improvement to get their water delivered for them. So I just want to make sure it's captured on the record. It's nothing new. You've heard me say this before. It's just my position when it comes to taxing those outside our service area for water projects. And that's all I have to say on the policies.
I think we've heard that every year, and every year the council's looked at it.
It's nothing new.
So you certainly are available to talk about that. We appreciate it. Any other comments on that? Yes, Julie?
We have an update on this system. We do need to reboot it. It will be 5 minutes before we have any microphones or recording. So I don't know if we want to take a
I'm going to leave you. Are you
5-minute
ready
break.
to go forth? Or you...
Oh, you want to take a break?
We just need a 5-minute recess to
All right.
reset the system.
Well, all right, then I'm going to recess, what, 5 minutes, you
5
think?
minutes.
All right, this is recess for 5 minutes.
Thank you.
To turn the microphones off.
Oh, just for clarification, that the financial policy that Councilman Pizzillo was raising was number 4 about the enterprise funds being self-sufficient, just for reference purposes.
And the note on the ballpark, I really like that for full disclosure. I really appreciate you putting that.
I have to confirm that. I thought that's right out in front of the public. I feel more comfortable with that, that it's put in that, don't you, in that frame up?
Yeah,
the
for
frame.
full disclosure, sure.
Yeah, I do too. I liked it. Good
And-
job.
Thank you. And this is the year that we went to the full debt service payment on the ballpark facility, so that's part of the reason that it exceeded the 10%. We did monitor it in the prior years. It just hadn't moved us above the 10%.
But then we have so many new people coming into the city all the time, and that's great information for them to have.
Sure.
Wally Campbell, Councilman Campbell is now here.
All right. All righty, so we're going to be doing a multi-handed thing here as we're trying to go through this. So I thought we'd start by going over the budget at a very high level. And I want to remind you that we do not have the carryovers in at this point in time. So the dollar amount that you're seeing today as the total budget will change when we go through the process of identifying items that would carry over out of this year's budget into next year. And again, those carryovers happen either because we couldn't get something under contract, or it's a longer-term item that takes more than a year to contract, complete, and make all the payments on.
And you
So-
did note it in the book, so I read it. Okay.
All righty. And so as the budget stands now, we're looking at a $328.3 million all-funds budget. And just kind of give you a couple views of what the budget looks like. In this case, it's kind of what are the funding sources. So about almost 40% of the budget is associated with the general fund, which is where we'll spend most of our time in the process. The rest you can see there, about a third is the enterprise funds, about 13% is enterprise funds. And the impact fees, the developer contribution, the bonds, those pieces make up the primarily are what's funding the CIP, although there are some operating funds in the CIP as well. So in terms of type of resource or the type of revenue that's supporting the budget, there are sales tax revenues, again, are the primary revenue of the general fund, but they make up just under 20% of the total budget. You'll see that the biggest piece is other revenues and fund balance. Again, fund balance in terms of the general fund occurs because we when we started the current year, we had estimated what we thought the prior year would finish with, and that number is different. So the beginning balance changes. And then as we go through the budget process, we re-estimate current year revenues and current year expenditures and achieve savings. And then we plan on spending the entire general fund. The other funds, such as the enterprise funds or the general fund reserves, are able to carry fund balances, and so that we can anticipate and project that capital projects might be coming forward. And so at times we're building those fund balances, knowing that something's coming that will deplete them in the future. So from year to year, the use of fund balance varies. And then you'll see water bonds at 17%. We do have an unusual project that started in the FY18 budget that continues into next year's budget, and that's the surface water plant. So that's a larger slice of the pie than we normally see there. In terms of what the resources are being spent on, about 40% of our budget is spent paying for the day-to-day operations of salaries, utilities, keeping the vehicles moving, running the buildings, and those types of things. The CIP, again, is 40% of this year's budget. Again, that's probably a little higher than we see in typical years because of that single surface water project that's very large. And then taking that, what was called O&M on that slide, or the day-to-day operating budget, this gives you a sense that that's $137.8 million is what it costs just to conduct our day-to-day business. And this provides you just an information on how those resources are spent by department. Public Works is a very large department, and that's where our 3 enterprise funds are. So it looks very large in this particular chart, keeping in mind that it's a multi-funded department.
The city council is very little mark there too.
Yeah.
For that, just want to bring that up.
Way down at the end, opposite end of the spectrum. So.
Open both eyes to see that one.
And then as you move into police, fire, parks and recreation, those are predominantly general funded departments, and most of the resources shown there are the general fund. So that's the bigger part of the general fund. And then we wanted to also just give you an overview of the number of positions included in the budget. And I want to talk a little bit about a change that we're making in how we handle positions. As you are aware, we're implementing a new financial system, which is bringing lots of benefits to the way we operate. One of the things that we're doing is we're going to be able to budget for our part-time positions on what would be called an FTE, or a full-time equivalent basis. Up to now, we've just been budgeting a lump sum dollar amount in the departments at our best estimate. What we've done is we've worked with each department that has part-time salary, has part-time use as an ongoing basis. So for example, in the parks area, when we have the pools open, we use part-time staff to operate the pools for lifeguards and those types of needs. And then in some of the ballpark, we have some maintenance folks that are at much higher use during the spring training season, ticket sellers and those types of things. So we've worked with each department, and we've translated their current year-based budget into the number of hours that they're using in different job types. And we've taken those, so if somebody had 2,080 hours of lifeguard, we would divide that by 2,080, which is the number of position hours for a full-time position, and identify that they have 1 FTE of part-time lifeguard.
Sherry?
Okay, I have 2 questions. I'm sorry if you weren't done. You might be getting here. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay.
We used to take out the ballpark positions when we figured out our employees per, 1,000, or how we did that. Did we do that this year when we figured that out? And then the second part of that is, if we're dividing it by 1 full-time employee, how do benefits work in there when we're figuring out the budget? Because I would assume some of these lifeguards, we're not paying benefits for those, so it'd actually be a lower cost.
All righty, I will try to address both of those. Please let me know if I missed. We are not excluding the ballpark positions in calculating the positions per 1,000 population. They are part of our ongoing operations. And in fact, that's one of those areas that's a very hard apples-to-apple comparison with other cities, because different cities offer lots of different types of services. Some have ballparks, some don't. Some operate airports, some don't. So it's a very difficult thing to make those kinds of comparisons. And then in terms of benefits for part-time positions, it's a complex set of rules that guide benefits for part-time positions with the Proposition 200, was it 206? Yes, that passed a year or two ago, that addressed minimum wage. It also now requires that part-time positions earn sick leave. So our part-time employees are all earning sick leave consistent with that legislation or that law. There are also pension-related expenses for part-time employees that work, and I don't know the facts, so the gist is if they work so much time and they work 20 hours or more a week, they eventually become pension eligible if that's done consistently 20 hours or more each week over time. And so if we have situations, which is one of the challenges with budgeting them just as a lump sum, because we've had these changes going on this last couple of years with their rates of pay changing and then some of them being eligible for retirement or sick leave. There's also some of the health insurance laws require that if they work for us over so much, again, another one of those that's measured on amount of time they work for us, they would eventually become eligible for health benefits in proportion to their activities with us. So those are cases that kind of complicate budgeting for the part-time positions. So with this method, we now have those positions and the people that are in them in our new financial system, so that we're able to look into the and we didn't do this in preparing this year's budget, but it's what we are going to be able to do. We'll be able to look into the system and call up, these are the part-time positions, and this is how many are earning health insurance, this is how many are earning pension, so that we can do a better job at forecasting the cost of those. But it's also going to help us, because right now we're just, the departments are having to take a stab at, well, what's the impact of the next minimum wage increase, because we know what they are coming forward. So we'll be able to build those into the system and forecast those wages as well, with that raise happening when the law calls for the wage, the increase to happen. So,
Joe?
Did I hear the employees per thousand were under 8?
Oh, I have the kind of a,
Okay.
it's going to be hard to see in this, wasn't prepared for necessarily Elmo. So what we've done is this is showing the positions per thousand.
Let me just expand on it. Is your definition on part-time?
Yes.
Again, if it's half, is that counted as 0.5 FTE?
Yes.
And we didn't do that before, or did we do that before?
No, we have not been including our part-time FTEs in the prior count, and so what we
Comparing
have,
apples to apples makes it a little more difficult then, I
Right.
assume then. Okay.
and some cities are including their part-time FTEs in their position counts and others are not, and so that's another reason that it's a complex measure. But it's hard to see here, but we've added the part-time positions to the count, the full-time equivalents, and as Councilman Pizzillo said, if it's 1,040 hours, it's 0.5 FTE, so that would get added.
to the total number, 8.31.
So that increased our total position count by 41 positions, or 41 full-time equivalent.
Still lower than 2008.
Right, and so even with those positions included, we're showing that the city manager's budget would put us at 7.6 full-time equivalent positions per 1,000 population, and we peaked back in 2009 at 9.28 positions. Without the part-time positions, it would be at 7.12. And by comparison, this year's budget, with the population corrected to this year, is 7.02.
That is good information to know, because that way you've got a comparison of apples to apples. So I appreciate the second part, even though now next year we'll have a new number to compare to the new base, but the fact that you weren't including those in the prior You don't want to skew the numbers, even though it's maybe not huge, but still they're skewed if you use the new way versus what you did before. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Right, and that's that little reddish line is showing you what the two number, what that would have looked like had we done it without the part-time. Essentially, 17 and 18 are almost equal if we hadn't included the part-time.
Thank you.
Joanne?
Are we going, just for the way this is flowing tonight, we're not going to talk about positions right now. Are we going to wait, Julie, until you give your presentation to discuss questions on certain asks that, did not get approved?
Correct. I mean, we certainly can discuss it at any point, but our intention was to do it as part of the supplement process as we went through each department.
Right, so we're trying to go through a high-level overview and then drill. And I will, if you ask a question that I know is covered later in the presentation, if it's all right, I'll let you know that that's coming up and ask you to remind me if I don't cover it when we get there. I would appreciate that.
I think we have to be careful of the numbers we're pulling out for half-time and full-time, because it says here 642 equals is 8.31% per thousand, or 8.31 employees per thousand. So now you come up with a half. So what are we going to put out to the public?
Well, what is going on, I think Julie, or the city manager mentioned earlier that this is a fluid process, and we're, again, in it right now, we don't have a nice financial system, so we're in a situation where we have a lot of spreadsheets flying around. That prior number was based on the population. We had not received an updated population for FY19. We have subsequently received that from the development services area, so the change there is only related to the change in the population factor. Okay. And each year we do an estimate of population that's used in the budget, and then in the subsequent year we correct the prior year to the actual MAG population. So development services and planning are working with us to project a population, but there's always a fine-tuning of it in the next year.
Okay.
Oops. All righty. And then the last kind of look at the FY19 budget from a high-level perspective is the capital improvement program, and we'll talk quite a bit about the capital improvement program later in the presentation. But this gives you a sense of how the CIP is funded. Again, a lot of our capital projects are growth-related. We're a rapidly growing city, and so impact fees are more than 40% of our next year's CIP, and then those same water bonds are in there as a big chunk of that total as well. And the developer contribution is, the majority of that is the $32 million associated with the water plant as well. And I don't know if there's any questions on the overall city budget. Otherwise, we'll go into an overview of the general fund budget.
Question? No? Go ahead.
Okay, so the general fund budget is $126.5 million, and again, I remind you there are not carryovers in this number, so these numbers will change again. And this shows you the makeup of how that's funded, where nearly 45% is funded by sales taxes, and that does include the assumption of the recommended change in the financial policy that $4.5 million in construction sales tax will be used on the ongoing part of the budget. Here, it's both portions are combined. So this just gives you a sense of where we are, and it shows that use of fund balance, which is primarily this year's projected ending balance. The general fund budget is approximately 3/4 of the general fund budget pays for those day-to-day operations. And as we saw before, police, fire, parks, public works are the big portions of of those operating costs. And then contingency here is 12%, and that contingency amount is at the 15% of ongoing revenues. So that is kind of the gist of what's there. And this, you'll see debt service here is 1%. because we use the true number for general fund debt service. The ballpark portion is part of the transfers out of the general fund. And if anybody notices me skipping a slide, let me know. I have to make sure I flip these over. What I thought I'd do now is, when we came in March, we gave you some information on we spent some time talking about our revenue estimates or resource estimates, and then we did an estimate of the resources that might be available to fund supplementals or additions in next year's budget. So I'm going to take a few slides, and I'm going to compare what you see now to what you saw on March 19th. So I'll start with the ongoing revenues and resources. We haven't changed the beginning balance. That's simply the O&M set aside from last year. The revenue has been revised primarily due to the addition of when we added the cost of the EMR fire station, we added the revenue that comes along with that. So that's why the revenue number has changed. Construction sales tax, you'll see we've reduced it by 4.5 million. We had it at 5 million when we met previously. And then the O&M set aside, we had at 2.2 previously. We are recommending the addition of a recreation supervisor, which would be something that we would anticipate adding with the recreation center. So it's accounted for in the O&M set aside. And later on, we'll talk about that supplemental addition. And then transfers from the enterprise funds are unchanged.
Joe?
Maybe a different slide later you have. Just tell me if that's the case. Still there? Okay. The 4.5 is the policy discussion. That gets added in. That's the construction sales tax. Where is the roughly, I think it's about $11-12 million worth of the ballpark stuff that is being transferred out of the general fund and going to those for either operations or debt service? That's not part of the 92 million, I assume.
This is the resource side of the 92 million. So I think in the next slide or the slide after that, I'll have the expenditure side.
Okay, thank you.
But those are funded by a transfer out of the general fund to the fund.
The reason why I asked the question is I wanted to get to what percentage of our overall operational resources, and what I mean by that is I'm taking into consideration the 4.5 coming in, taking into consideration the enterprise fund coming in as a plus the projected operating general fund revenue as one big pot. From that goes out the, set-asides, goes out the ballpark, and any other transfers out. So I get to a percentage of what actually of our new money is being used for routinely day-to-day operations. And, I just a rough guess, 75%, maybe a little more than that, I don't know. But I think it shows a nice picture to show that how much money we have to set aside off the top just to fund, the set-asides for future future fire stations, et cetera, because even with EMR, after 5 years, we got to come up with $2 million. So you got to start setting aside, $400,000, $500,000 a year. So I just wanted to see a picture of that big pie, and when that all comes out, you only have 75% or whatever that number is to do your routinely day-to-day operations.
Okay.
You see where I'm kind of coming from on that?
We'll try to get there. If we don't get it in today's materials, we'll try to have something ready for the next week's meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So is that for you to be comfortable, or is that you think the public would like to see that?
Well, I think the public, to the extent where you're looking at how much money you have, but at the same token, you only have maybe 75, I don't know what the percentage is, I just throw that out, that you can use for road, streets, police, and fire, because the other is going for set-asides for, our future fire station replacements and our future, employees that are coming in for the fire stations. So we don't have to find $2 million whenever that's due. We're setting aside $400,000 or whatever it is a year, so it doesn't disrupt your day-to-day operations. Mm-hmm. So it gives you a picture of what you really have available. Yeah. And to me, that's a very interesting picture. We don't have 100%. We have less than that because of these commitments that are coming down the road. And that's where I think it's helpful to me, and I also think it's helpful to the public to understand
That's
what
I
you
think.
have.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
So,
Mayor?
Joanne?
Well, and I appreciate that perspective, Joe. I actually Friday sat down with Lori, gosh, I think for almost 3 hours, going over all of this. So you'll be happy I'm not, getting all of my questions right now. But to that point, and I had asked her about the ambulance situation, and within our 5-year, projection, we also are talking about that. And so I think that is a picture for the public that they don't always see, that we are thinking long-term and we are looking at, how we're going to fund these different positions. I think it is a big part of the picture.
I think it's also for understandable. It makes it more clear to them.
Sure.
I think they see the total picture. Maybe be a little apprehensive to shoot out some remarks, not, if you have the information, that's what they need. Yes, Brandon?
A quick question, make sure I didn't miss Ender here. Did we say the revenue increase portion?
Talk any microphone,
Sorry, you
please.
said the revenue was increased. Is it because of the EMR O&M?
Yes,
Did you say,
we didn't, when we prepared the base budget, we didn't assume any new supplemental activities. Even, so we prepare a straight base budget based on current service levels. But when we added the supplemental to add the 14 positions to staff the fire station, we then added the revenue that EMR is obligated to pay us through a development agreement. And so they'll be paying us $1.8 million a year for 5 years towards the operations of that fire station.
okay, that makes sense. Originally, I thought you said, never mind. I thought it was that we add a fire station, then we make revenue. So.
I'm sorry, yeah, and I could see how you could get there, and that's my mistake not to be clear that was a situation from a developer contribution. And I will, since we were on the topic of the set-aside, I don't have a slide with me to show the calculation of the set-aside, but the set-aside, if you'll recall, for operation and maintenance, each year we increase it by $1.25 million, and then we subtract from it anything that we're adding in that year's budget that was included in the set-aside. And the set-aside currently accounts for the end of the EMR, the ending of this $1.8 million. So we are including that in calculating the set-aside. It also assumes the end of the revenue that we're receiving from SEDEA, which is also an O&M-like payment that comes in on each permit that's pulled. It's assuming that will have to be made up. It includes the funding for the recreation campus, initial recreation campus projects with the rec center, the park, and the aquatics facility. Their operating costs are included in that. The ambulance, expansion of the ambulance program is included, as well as, I'm forgetting something, another fire station, the West Goodyear Fire Station is also included.
do you have a total off your head, what that is?
Well,
Any idea what the total of
it's-
all of those are?
The $1.25 million a year over 5 years, I believe, will get us there. And so we've included inflation and those types of things.
Go ahead.
Mayor, can I ask?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sherry?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. So for the public, if we could get a slide that shows all these set-asides broken down, very, kind of like this slide, very simply over the years, what we are setting aside. Because I think that lets people know that there's future costs that we're planning for, but also lets know just because we see a dollar figure down there, that's not all money we can use right now for ongoing expenses. So I would appreciate that too.
Okay.
Thanks.
Mhm. All
I
right.
think we all agree with that.
All right.
Go ahead.
Okay. All righty. And then the same kind of look on the one-time side, this is just the resources piece. And so again here, we've had an increase in beginning balance, and I'll explain that. We do receive in lieu payments from developers for things like their share of a traffic signal or of a road. This is, again, another one of the things that's going to be an improvement in our new financial system. As we're going through and reconciling the funds that we have in our account currently, we identified a number of those dollar amounts that we currently have for which the projects have already been completed. So we're entitled to that revenue. It's no longer needs to be held in order to deliver the project that it's related to. So that was an additional $1.5 million in one-time revenue that we recorded in the current year that becomes beginning balance for next year. And then the other two changes on this page are related to reducing the amount of construction sales tax going to ongoing, means there's more in the one-time side. And then by spending some of the set aside on the recreation supervisor, there's less available on the one-time side. All righty. So this, again, we're presenting it similar to how we handled this at the base budget presentation. So with this particular item, we are showing the change in resources as the first line, is the slides we just went through. We do have a decrease in what we identified as the O&M budget when we met with you in March. There was a transfer of the GIS function from the engineering department to the IT department, and we had gotten it into the one department and hadn't gotten it out to the other. So that reduces our base budget. We funded $2.9 million in supplementals. The debt service has remained the same, and there was an adjustment to transfers associated with a double counting, or with the revenue associated with one of the traffic signals that's being added in the HERF program. And keep in mind that HERF is, we spend much more on streets than the HERF resources, so a change in HERF is really a change in the general fund. And so I have an additional slide to kind of help, when we saw those numbers before, and again, this is kind of hard to see in this environment. This is not in your packet, but if you'll recall, before we told you we'd have $1 million in funding available for supplementals, and then we've taken $500,000 away, and I'm sure everybody's wondering how in the world were we able to fund $2.9 million in supplementals. And so this kind of walks through what the changes were. So we had the million. We added that $1.8 million in revenue related to the EMR fire station. We lost the $500,000 from the construction sales tax, and then we picked up the $100,000 from the O&M set aside, which gave us $1.4 million in resources. We used 2.9 for supplementals, and again, I'm mentioning that double counting of the GIS positions and then the transfer from HERF that I just mentioned. And so that gets you take the $1 million, you add to it the 1.4, and you subtract the 2.4, and that's how we were able to fund the supplementals that are being recommended.
Brandon?
Just a separate question, really. I got an email about our risk. We got like a refund for our risk. Did we decide what we're doing with that? Is that coming back into the general fund, or is that going to pay it forward?
If you're referring to our liability insurance premium, we are receiving a rebate, and that will become general fund revenue. And then it will, if we receive it this year, it will mean when we come talk to you at the beginning of next year, we'll say beginning balance is higher than we anticipated, and one of the reasons it will be higher is because that payment came in. I will tell you that historically we used to credit that against expenditures, which is probably something that's not the best accounting practice, and it makes it very hard to predict that expense moving forward if you have variation in that return.
Okay. Yeah, I was just looking at some of these are smaller than others, and that kind of fits smaller possible additions.
Well, and this is only the ongoing part, so that would become a one-time revenue anyway. But yeah, we were mainly concerned with, because we started with that $1 million and we immediately took away $500,000, it would be hard for for the public to understand how we could have gotten from having $500,000 to adding $2.9 million in expenses. So that's why I went ahead and pulled this together and added it to the information. Okay, on the one-time side, a similar analysis. I haven't done a similar analysis as here. It wasn't quite as close of a call as we had on the other one. But we reviewed the increase in the resources. We had to increase the contingency slightly because of adding that EMR revenue and adjusting the construction sales tax. Again, the contingency is based on 15% of ongoing revenues. So we slightly increased the contingency. There was no change in the asset management recommendation. There's $5.6 million in one-time supplementals being recommended in the materials before you. And then as we're reviewing the CIP, there's two entries on this related to the CIP. The first is actual projects that we have budgets in for next year that were identified, that we're prepared to move forward with those projects. We know we're confident with the costs. There's $3.7 million in CIP projects being recommended. That's less than the $6.8 million that was originally in the capital plan. And if we skip down a line to the $7.6 million, that $7.6 million is made up of the savings in some of those CIP projects as well as the unspent one-time funds. And that is being recommended to be in a capital projects reserve so that as we finish the CIP process, those resources will be there available for us to bring back those projects, especially if they have an increase in the cost. And then the other item on here is $2.3 million of supplementals were added for the ballpark and for HERF. And as I mentioned earlier, ballpark and HERF are ultimately funded by the general fund. So those that transfer over to the ballpark and to HERF from the general fund has to be increased for the purposes of covering those one-time supplementals. And are there any questions about that? Otherwise, we'll move into the general fund forecast.
Any questions? Go ahead.
All righty. So you'll notice if you looked closely at the financial policies, the last financial policy says you'll make your decision about the budget in the context of a forecast. So this is that forecast that we said we're in compliance with. And so this is a 5-year forecast for the general fund. We've assumed the maximum allowable primary property tax in each of the 5 years. That's consistent with financial policy. We've assumed a 5% annual growth rate in local sales tax. And again, reminding you about a forecast, some of the year it's going to be 2%, another year it's going to be 10%. So we've just kind of done an average across the 5 years that's consistent. We could try to predict a recession, but we would be guessing just like anybody else. So we haven't built per se a recession in here other than just the general assumption about growth. Construction sales tax, we assume 2% annual growth just to be conservative, and we did have that $4.5 million will be showing up each year on the ongoing side and $4.5 million less on the one-time side. The state shared revenues, we've assumed from a 1.5 to a 5% growth. I'll remind you that we talked last time about the state income tax is still slow growing in the first couple of years because of historical legislative changes on that. So that's primarily what the low end is. And then the other revenues, we assumed about a 2% per year growth. We also show that in FY24, the EMR, $1.8 million a year, and the payments that we're receiving from SEDEA should be satisfied in 23, and therefore those revenues would not be available to us starting in 24.
Joe?
SEDEA is different than the others. It's so much per building permit, right?
Correct. It's a stated dollar amount in the agreement that was then equated to the number of permits they would pull. Occasionally, they change the number and they have to recalculate it, and I don't remember what the dollar amount is. It's something in the $5,000 to $10,000 range per permit we receive.
But the amount we're getting is nowhere near what, let me correct it, is it anywhere close to EMR?
Let me answer that at another time. It's either
Okay.
$3 million or $6 million. I don't remember which it is, so
But that difference also has to be in our set-asides to make up that difference as well.
Yes. Yes, and I believe it's about, it'll lose about close to $600,000 in that last year is what we expect last year's revenue to be.
And that'll show in that new spreadsheet or whatever you're going to come up with. Okay. Thanks, fine.
righty.
Gary?
I'm sorry, I have one more quick question on the last slide. When you have a 1.5 to 5% growth, that's a pretty good size spread. Do you know about when we'll know, like, closer to target, or are we just going to kind of plan closer to the 1.5?
Well, Mayor, Council Member, this is the case of where we assumed 1.5% growth in the income tax in 20, and I think maybe 2% in 21. The others we're assuming closer to 5% every year. It's just to acknowledge that and to remind everybody that our income tax is not growing as quickly as possible. In terms of the current, or in FY19's revenue, we've received estimates for the pot that will be distributed to the city, but we have not received the population estimates. So for next year's budget, we have not changed our revenue estimates for state shared. I don't anticipate that we would I don't think you'd see a large gain in revenue. I would guess that we're pretty close to what it will be once those population numbers come out. But again, we don't have recent experience with consistent information on our population growth, so we're probably still a couple years away to having a feel for what our year-to-year population growth will be.
And part of that income tax, that's the corporate tax that would be in that pot that they keep cutting or is still being cut.
Yes. So yeah, the corporate, we share in the corporate income, we share in income tax, state shared income tax on a 2-year lag. So we know now that 1.5 is probably reasonable going out because that information is already available. Part of the reason for the 2-year lag is so audits and those types of things can be completed, but we have a reasonable belief that that's likely to occur.
In the future, we're going to see that drop if it continues.
Yep.
The thought continues on their part, yeah.
Ready? Alrighty. So expenditure side assumptions or uses assumptions. We've assumed a 3.25% annual growth in the base budget and in the interfund transfers to the ballpark and the HERF funds. The CIP in the forecast, we hadn't completed what we just recommended for you in terms of the CIP. So it's still in at the most recently adopted full plan. It hasn't been revised for our current recommendations. And then the O&M set aside is, as we've discussed previously, it assumes that same $1.25 million a year and then peeling off the uses when those expenses are expected to come online. And then the asset management is per the plans that were updated for the FY19 budget process. So this is a lot of numbers. So essentially, we started the forecast based on the city managers. It has CMO. I had city manager's office on my mind instead of city manager's budget. So we started from the city manager's budget, recommended budget that you're seeing now, and that's where we applied the growth rates that we've just reviewed in terms of expenditures and revenues. And if you look towards the bottom line, that gives you a sense of what kind of situation we'll be in moving forward in terms of the potential for ongoing supplementals within the assumptions that we've laid out. And so you'll see that there's, as we get to the end that last year, we have a drop off there, and part of that is due to both that SEDEA and that EMR development agreement revenue dropping off. And I've told you before, and I'll tell you again, the one thing we know for sure is these numbers are wrong, and they are more intended just to give you a general sense of what the future looks like, and so that within the context of moving forward.
Joanne?
And when you say that, well, I mean, we know that these are just assumptions, and so conservative. In typical years in the past, these assumed numbers tend to grow rather than be smaller.
I would say that that's reasonable. It's probably more so the case on the one-time side, but I agree. But the anticipation would be that with the exception of not predicting when a recession might happen, that things should look better than this forecast.
Thank you.
Joe?
If I read this correctly, next year's fiscal year is going to be probably the best out of the 5 years of what you're going to have available. Is that
In
fair to say?
20, yes.
And what would you say the assumption is why that is?
Let me look at the numbers there. It's just the nature of one of the things is this year we had higher pay increase. The labor agreements are higher in the first year for police and fire, so next year it shouldn't be quite as expensive. We know what their agreements are, so that piece of our expenditure puzzle isn't as expensive. We did reduce out of next year the one-time election, and then it would pop back in and out, so there's a small expense associated with that. Part of it's just the nature of if we assume 5% revenue growth, 5 and 2% revenue growth, and 3.25% expenditure growth, they start to catch up.
Yeah, the only reason why I say that is if you look at the base, it goes up about less than $3 million in 20, and it goes up $6 million in 21. So
And that's
your
that
gap.
in and out of the election type thing.
Okay.
Mayor.
Sherry?
Yeah, I noticed that. I think, this might have been a similar slide that you showed us a couple weeks ago when we kind of went over some of those issues and we started doing the math. I do appreciate you not doing a rosy scenario, because I think what we all learned when the recession, when it came on quickly and without notice, and I don't think we want to get to the point what we had to do last time. So I do appreciate that, and I assume we update this every year, so if it's looking better the next year, I prefer to take small steps, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I think we all do on that one. We don't want to be caught, so.
All righty. And so on the one-time side, this is a little different than the last time we did this for you. The kind of the hard thing to predict on the one-time side is what will the ending balance be in the prior year. So we took a conservative approach, and I believe we took 75% of the next year's ending balance or next year's beginning balance, and used that as the measure, and then grew it by the 3.25%. So that's an area where when I say that more than likely the one-time side would be more rosy or would do better than the ongoing forecast, that's probably the area where it's a little bit more difficult to forecast where we'd be. But it is a much more realistic forecast of the beginning balance than we've used in prior years for the one-time side. So the numbers look different than if you remember last year's forecast. They are a little bit bigger on the bottom line than the last time you saw this. So again, the same thing on the bottom line. You can kind of see where we're predicting the resource, what types of resources might be available to fund additional capital projects or one-time needs. And I'll remind you again that the CIP is something that likely is going to change. In fact, I believe we've actually taken it out from preparing the original slide, so that would include having to cover any CIP projects as well. All righty. Ready? If we'll move on to an overview of the
Need a
CIP.
break? Are you all right? All right, anybody wants water or trees, just get up when you want to get them, okay? Go ahead.
All righty, and this particular slide is mislabeled. It should be, it's the 5-year CIP. It's not the 231.4 million is the 5-year CIP, not the FY19 CIP. It's relatively small. It's not a lot more than the current and the FY19, because again, in the CIP, we are taking some steps to revamp that program. But it just gives you the sense that about half of our 5-year CIP is also funded by impact fees. and keeping in mind that our impact fees are only forecasted for the term of the current study, and we're starting a new study to look at that. And so just to talk a little bit more about the CIP process update that we're going through, this is kind of, we went through all of the projects to identify the ones that was critical for them to begin or that were continuing in FY19, and we took the time to evaluate them, and we are recommending those projects as part of the FY19 budget. We are going to take several more months to go through the rest of the CIP. We feel the only way to do this is to take our time and not rush. So we are continuing the process to review the scopes, the cost estimates, and the timelines for all the other projects that were in the CIP. Some of those, as Julie mentioned in her introduction, when you look at the project listing for the CIP, you'll see that something like the Recreation Center is shown as being removed in terms of dollars. We're not showing a construction budget in FY19. It's not because we don't anticipate that we're not saying that project is stopping. We're just saying that we're at a critical point in estimating the costs on that project, and we don't want to risk putting a dollar amount out there, and in 2 months we'll get better information. We'd rather wait and come forward to you with, we feel good about these timelines and these cost estimates. And so what we did is we took the resources. So for example, if the Aquatic Center had, and these aren't the correct numbers, but if the Aquatic Center had $10 million in bond funds in it for next year, we took that $10 million in bond funds and we put it in something called a CIP Project Reserve, so that when we're ready to come forward again, the resources that were originally allocated to those projects will still be there and be available. And we're budgeting that in FY19 so that as we go through this process, if we get to a point where we're ready to say, hey, we feel really good about the recreation campus, we want to come forward and talk to council and have them reallocate those funds to the projects, we'd have the budget capacity to do that this year if we can do so. And in terms of your materials, because the CIP process is still kind of a work in progress for us, you don't see quite what we normally present for the CIP, but I just wanted to review what we have included. We're often asked, and the CIP are the big fold-out pages in your materials. The first set of fold-out materials are the current 10-year CIP. It has not changed the dollar amount. We have not changed the projects. All that we did was reflect the current year. We kind of highlighted that, and then we show the next 5 years as they were presented in the CIP, the current CIP. And then we just put a total for the years beyond that, because if you'll recall, we're also going to move away from a 10-year CIP to a 5-year CIP. So we're kind of setting the stage for moving to a 5-year. But what we're trying to communicate in this particular set of materials is after the funding source, there's a status. And that status is telling you where we think we are in the process relative to the project. You know, so for example, the public art projects, in the past we've budgeted a lump sum. We're going to move forward to a situation where we budget specific projects. So you'll see in the future specific projects coming forward. If we think a project will be completed this year, we're saying that we expect to complete it this year. If it's a project that's happening this year and it'll carry over, we're telling you we think it's going to carry over. And then we identify any projects that might be moving out for further review.
It's just more realistic. I was very excited about this because we'll actually be able to talk about something and we'll actually see it done. I mean, we actually can see, okay, this is going to be finished. And I think we're being more realistic on the time frame and the cost. Joe?
After you hone in on the capital projects for this fiscal year, is it possible to get a start date, even if it started the prior fiscal year, and a projected completion date? I don't need to see the entire project timeline, but I think it would be helpful to see what we started and what you think the finish date's going to be. Okay, so remember we had talked about trying to get some accountability on the projects, without seeing an end date and a start date, you don't have anything to compare it to see whether you were on or off when the project was actually finished. So it would be helpful whenever you decide which ones are going to be for this current fiscal year, what the start date is, even if it was last year, and when the finish date is. All I need to see is those 2 dates.
And Mayor, Councilmember, that is our intent, and that's one of the things that our process is doing right now. We are actually asking departments for more detail than that, as you've,
Well, I'm
we're
sure
asking
you
them,
will.
in what quarter will you be awarding this the design, and what quarter do you think you'll be complete?
Right.
So we will be providing that information.
Thank you.
Brandon? Brandon?
When we track the projects, do we do any the formulas like the CPI, the cost performance indicators, or the schedule indicator, or indicators for you guys to track?
We are, there are a couple things that are going on with tracking project. Engineering is working very hard to come up with a system. They're tracking items down to each phase of the project in terms of when it'll be completed in the current year. In terms of planning the projects going forward, we've spent a lot of time in the process that we've came up with engineering and with purchasing and with the budget office, talking with each department about realistically, how long does it take if you want to procure a design contract? Don't forget you need to design a scope and all this. So we spent a lot of time talking about our processes and what the steps are to help people develop their timelines. And then we're allowing inflation of 3% per year on the projects. We know there's a lot of discussion right now about cost of steel and those types of things, and we're holding the line until we get a better sense of what's going on there. I don't know if that responds to your question or if I didn't quite get it.
Specific project management question, but
Talk in the microphone,
I can get
please.
with it later.
Closer to the microphone so we can hear you.
It's more of a way to track cost and schedule, but I can get with you later about it.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
thanks.
All right.
Joanne?
Thank you. Is there a point in this conversation when we're going to be discussing facilities more in depth in the, I guess, for example, I know that we were talking about the police building phase 2 coming up in the next, I guess it's broken down between now and 2023 or in separate sections. And a couple of the things that we had discussed previous, and I don't know if you already discussed it in the meeting that I missed, but for example, the K-9 training part was not in there, and I just have not heard that facilities discussion in a while, where we are in growth, what, are we at capacity in certain buildings? I mean, are we looking past 10 years of saying we're going to be, busting at the seams here, and something that I think needs to be considered as, we're very good at planning. Every department gets planned, gets thought about 5-10 years out. The city council needs offices. You look 5-10 years out for the councils of the future. They need offices. Where does that fit into the plan? And so, I'm just curious about things like that because, I've just seen in all these years that we have done a very good job, but you know what? This council's got to go with that growth too. And so I don't know where we are in capacity of buildings. And we just haven't had that talk. And so I know that there's only so many bond dollars available for a future city hall or another building, or is it a point where, hey, we sell this center because we're building new one? But I just don't know that we've had those discussions in a while. And so I bring that up. I may be gone by the time you have those discussions, but I just put it out there that, that is going to be reality, I have a feeling, fairly soon.
At the budget retreat, the discussion about there were some projects in the CIP about doing additional work at the City Hall facility. You'll notice there was a supplemental request to work on the lobby, which is something we heard about late in last year's budget process and considered. But much of the conversation, or what we took back from the budget retreat, was that it was important for us to do exactly what you're asking us to do, is to step back and say, what is our most logical next step? Do we continue to invest in the facility, the City Hall building, or do we step back and explore, are there other options for us, and do we have the resources to do those? So I don't believe that conversation has taken place yet. I think it's a little bit more work to step back and look at that, but that is the intent, is to reevaluate what is the best way to serve our needs.
Well, and what's the menu board of options to fund it all, and what that means. So, okay, thank you.
I do think you were very clear in the ones you're looking at, the recreation campus, the funding, the fire stations, Adela O&M, police operations phase 2. I think that you have said in here the direction you're looking into. You just can't give us the final information at this point, but I was really engaged and excited about, okay, we're picking out projects here. You're looking at things that we really can do. And we're going to be able to counsel, you aren't because you're leaving us at the present time, but we're going to see some that are actually going to brick and mortar, or, you know, grounds moving. I love it. So I have to say, I was very excited about this new way of thinking in this 5-year period of time where you can really get your hands and mind around it all and see some action. So I'm sorry, I lost who wanted to talk next. Anybody else? Wally?
So, Lori, over the years, we do a CIP plan. Things drop off. We add more. What happens to the drop-off ones? Do we have a list somewhere to refresh our memory on what used to be on the CIP that has no longer been important enough to raise to a higher level? Are there things out there that we need to be thinking about that we've just put on the wayside for so many years we've forgotten about them?
The intent of the process we're going through, and that we started trying to do that with this document, to start lining that out. But the intent of when we get to the end of the process we're going through right now is that we would end with a list of these projects were eliminated for this reason, or this is a list of projects that were requested that we're not able to fund. So our intent is to create a document to stay on top of what might still be out there. And each year then after that, we'll still conduct a CIP process to look at, are we still pursuing the right things at this point in time, and adding that next year on. Hopefully, most of the reasons moving forward that a project will drop off will be because it's been completed.
Well, that's what we hope, but there may be a project that we really are interested in, but we have forgotten because we keep moving everything around.
Yeah.
So that I'm anxious to hear your report when you're done. I hope it's this year.
It will be before we adopt the FY20 budget.
Good, thank you.
The other document in the CIP also goes through the projects, and it is showing you, because we've also been asked we've talked about what changes in projects. And so it is, again, not quite the way you normally see the CIP, but we essentially go through and we have every other fiscal year is in a color difference, so you can kind of see fiscal year to fiscal year. But we show you what the current CIP says for that project, if there's any changes in what we're recommending, and then what the new amount is for the year, so that you could go through and see any changes. We further organize this by the projects that have no changes, the projects that are they may say be removed, but in some cases it just means removed from the current process, and they'll be looked at in the next process. So that you can kind of see what's going on. To kind of give you a sense, and I'm looking for it on the second page of the sheets that have the coloration. If you look at the police building phase 2, which is about a quarter of the way down, you'll notice that that particular project, we've advanced $153,000 into this year. That's one of the supplemental requests, was asking to advance that so we could start doing the pre-work on that. We actually went through the full review process with that particular project, and that was kind of where we used as our baseline to say, how long will it take us to accomplish this project, and how should we approach it? And so we have included increased dollars associated with that project after having done the full review. And so that's why that particular project is included for beyond the current year, because it made it through. It was kind of our test case in the project that we're working on.
Well, I think that's what council asked for. The last time we got together, they talked about, let's complete that.
Yep. So. But again, I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what you have here in terms of the materials with regard to the CIP. I'm live. Oh, thanks. I wonder, it's like, that doesn't look the right color. If you want to try to get it back in order. All righty, we have slides again.
Oh, you're online
well,
now.
but I'm kind of afraid to push the little button. So what I wanted to do next was actually talk a little bit more about the CIP reserve. I kind of mentioned the concept a little while ago. But the CIP reserve is that project that we're putting the resources into from some of the projects that we've removed from listing them as specifically funded next year. And so that project is actually a very large project right now. We have essentially $36.8 million sitting in that project. $7.7 million comes from the general fund. $16.6 million is GO bonds, primarily those associated with the recreation campus. And then non-utility impact fees also primarily associated with the park at the recreation campus. So again, that concept that if a project was in next year in the CIP, we've hung on to its resources and put them down there in that reserve so we can come back to you and if need be in the coming year to move forward with those projects. So the purpose, and if you'll recall, we had a CIP project reserve in this year's budget as well. This continues to be not only the holding place for those funds for those projects that we're continuing to review, but we also anticipate it will continue to serve as a place to address unanticipated cost increases in projects. And we're not talking about the kinds of cost increases that we've experienced in the past. This would be situations more like steel prices went up unexpectedly. We had a steel estimate of this in the project, and because prices changed so much, we're now short, not because we didn't have that in the scope or we didn't plan for it, but because there's something well outside of what we could have predicted that has caused the cost change. We'd also use that as another place for the times when we have to when we're advancing some of these impact fee projects. We have to cash flow that, though sometimes we have to build it before we get it, the resources, and so we have the ability to do some of those loans. And then if during the year there is an unanticipated need, it'd be a place to go to if there was an unexpected capital project. And I think this year there was I don't remember. There was a project earlier this year. Now I've lost lost my thought about which project it was. But something came up, and you asked. We went ahead and used this fund to do that.
I think that's called flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it sounds good.
All righty. So I just want to go over the significant changes again, and I think we're making sure where it's very clear that that what we're if we're showing something here, we're not eliminating the project, we're just taking a pause and redoing the project timelines and cost estimates. So the recreation campus is a big project that is scheduled to be constructed coming up at either late next fiscal year or early the following fiscal year. So those projects you don't see as individually budgeted projects next year. You will see the carryover when we do the carryovers of the design that is going on now into next year, and part of that is what we're using to improve the cost estimates. So those funds are in that reserve. The fire stations 183 and 181 projects, the renovation of 183, and then the potential reuse of 181, the existing 181. We've removed the construction funds for those because, again, we're still scoping 181, what it will be used for. And then on 183, because we are designing the new stations, we want to make sure we take advantage of whatever we can in the design that comes out of those new stations when we renovate 183. There are cost increases for the project from Van Buren, from Estrella to Saraville that are reflected, but that project is moving forward. And then you'll also notice that pavement management was previously in the CIP, and I think as I mentioned when we met last time, we have part of that money in the operating budget and part of it in the CIP. We're putting it all together in the operating budget because there's no difference between what the monies are used for. So just to high level, the big deal in the big dollars in the CIP for next year are the surface water plant, which is in there for almost $85 million. Again, that one will also have a carryover, and that number will grow larger. The fire apparatus for the EMR station and for the West Goodyear station are both budgeted next year, so we can take advantage of perhaps buying more than one at a time. And also the lead times are very long for those pieces of equipment, so we want to get those procurements going. And then the Capital Project Reserve is as we just reviewed, is the other large project that's in there. So on a high level, this is kind of the wrap up. The overall budget's $328 million plus, and we will again adjust it with carryovers. The general fund is a balanced budget, meaning we've allocated the resources to be spent. The budget is compliant with the laws that we're required to follow and with your financial policies, and we believe it's a sustainable budget. So that's kind of the overview of the budget. I don't know if we have any other questions on the overview.
I also want to make some comments on it. How do you feel about it? There are some changes, new things? Joe?
Not at this point. I appreciate the reserve so that you're going back and rescoping. There's nothing worse than finding out you're $10 million short on a project that has to be stolen from somewhere else. So the fact you're going back and look at it, I think, is very important. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Sherry?
And I'm going to echo that. Thank you for all your hard work because it's very conservative, and I would rather, even for the CIP and the budget just in general, I would rather us say, okay, let's look at the projects, let's plan them out rather than overpromise. Because what's happened before is we've had citizens say, well, I thought my street or I thought this street was going to get done, and it just keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed. So I think having a reasonable plan, taking the time to do that is very, very thoughtful and conservative, just like your numbers and your scenarios where we came out with. I think it's better to be able to have money left over that if we need to do something or have an emergency, for the next year, that's better than, overpromise and underdeliver. So thank you.
Brandon?
Yeah, I want to say thank you as well, and also with just the attention to where we could get ourselves in trouble with either losing some revenue here or there, or projects that we have to take money from ourselves. So, yeah, I appreciate you looking at those and at least having some closer to real numbers that we can work off of, so to protect ourselves.
Joanne?
Well, I think you and all the staff should be proud of what you're accomplishing in our city, because we've been through a time where it wasn't nice, pretty pictures that you could really feel good about. Oh, we're going to get this taken care of, and this is going to be, set aside, and it feels very strong when you have an outlook that is sustainable and that we're taking care of things that need to be taken care of, and we're growing. And it's always been, sometimes we always feel like we're a little bit in a bubble in Goodyear, but it's a great place to be. And so I'm proud of everything that has been accomplished. And thank you for those, couple hours, because, there's times that going through all this, no matter how many years you're looking at it, it's like, okay, and why is it this way? And what is this? And so, I appreciate what you guys do with our budget. Thank you.
Joe, you're good? Molly? Good. Well, I just think it's focused us. I think we're more focused on what are our accomplishments that we want to, the next ones we want to have. And I think so, because I know it must be very confusing in council meetings, because we always come up, well, I want this project, and I don't want this project. Well, whatever happened to that project? And so you sort of forced us, in a sense, to stay focused on the projects that we can finish, and then we'll go on to the other. But still, the flexibility, if something happens and we do need to move something, because one of those ahead of the other, we'll be able to do that. So staff, I know it took a lot of hours to do this and think about it and back and forth, and especially with all the different departments and needs and things they want and on and on. But I really feel comfortable about this one. I can walk away and say, wow, this is sustainable. I think we can make this happen, and it's exciting. So thank you. So now we're on to.
All righty, so if we're ready to move forward, what we were going to do is kind of walk through each department's budget. We haven't done this in this style in the past. We usually just give you some kind of, here's the kinds of supplementals we did. So we're going to walk through each department's budget. What I wanted to do is refer you again to your materials. There is a listing of all the supplemental requests. I think it's after the the fourth or fifth orange sheet. It starts with a summary page and supplemental requests and summary recommendations, where we list, it'd be before the CIP pages. Let's see. Yeah, it's the section right before the CIP pages. So right before the long page, the long folded pages. And so these materials, identify the.
Here it is. Yeah, that's it.
Do I need to? I'll let you all find it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Joe.
That's okay.
No, just one quick comment. You may be hitting it later on the property tax primary, secondary. Is that later in the presentation?
We don't have something specific on the primary and secondary property tax, but I'll try to dig it out of my memory.
Well, no, just a general note. My crude calculation is between the primary and the secondary total, it's about a 7.3% increase. And I think last year, I'll ask the same question. Is there, out of that 7.3, can you break that out? What is new growth, an estimate of what's new growth and what's the existing ones now?
Yeah.
So that we're, already in the system, because I know it's significantly less than 7.3. So,
Yeah.
And I know it's an estimate because you got to go back and figure out, you go 2% on the primary, but the rate's staying the same on the secondary. So if I can get a feel for that, it would be helpful. That's all.
So
We'll
the
provide that. I
1.73.
know it's 177.6 for the
me.
2% on the primary, but I don't know what it is on the secondary. So we'll break those two numbers out for you.
Okay, thanks.
Quick question
Yes,
to
Joanne?
that, actually, and that's funny you brought that up, because you told me 2% of 177,625.
Yep.
177,000. But I was also curious on how much was actual new homes and growth versus understanding that 2%. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we'll break it down into the individual pieces for you and provide that as part of next week's meeting.
All right. Go ahead.
All righty, so what you have, just wanted to refer you to the materials that are here in this section. What it lists, there's a cover sheet that kind of gives you the financial summary, and then for each department, it provides a brief description of any supplemental requests they had. It shows what they requested in terms of costs and if there was positions involved. And then the last three columns list what's included in the city manager's recommended budget. And so that will give you a sense of kind of more details on what's being recommended as we go through this. All righty. So in terms of department budgets, we'll start with the mayor and council. Their base budget is $326,000. Technically, we say there are no positions in the mayor and council budget because of the nature of how you're paid. There is no change to the special projects fund. So that special projects fund that's been being carried over from year to year is just scheduled in the current proposal to be carried over for use in a future year. And the mayor and council office did not ask for any supplementals.
Brandon?
So I thought, looking back at the very back here, some of the ideas from that we brought up during the budget retreat.
Microphone.
When we came back from the budget retreat, I thought there were some supplementals in the back about council discretionary fund, council contingency, the 75th anniversary. And I don't know if that's where that budget comes out of, or if I'm thinking of a different pot.
The Special Projects Fund is the fund that is used when the council agrees. I think we funded something for the veterans 2 years or a year ago. So it is the fund that you tap. And did we do the wildlife, was there conservancy? The conservancy project this year. And so the historical practice has been, it was funded and it's just been carried over. You are correct that there were conversations at the budget retreat about other options for that. At this point in time, we didn't come forward with a recommendation to make a change in the FY19 budget, just that we would carry over the remaining amount.
Okay.
Joanne?
However, we didn't finish that conversation about council discretionary, and because that was brought up. And actually, and I don't know if this is the right place or not, but one of the other things I had asked about months ago, and this was before our new city manager, but that had to do with the block party van. I can't remember what it was called now, but I never received an update on that, of what it cost, and it was an idea of something that our citizens can use for their HOAs and for their block parties and things like that, and it's very successful and surprised, and I had not heard back about that. But so there are some things that we did bring up, especially as council, that I guess we don't have an answer to, or maybe you needed further discussion. Maybe that's what.
Yeah, and again, it's a process of balancing the budget within the resources that are available, and that's, again, why we're here today. We're preparing a recommended budget as something for you to respond to and provide us feedback on. And if we hear strongly that there is an ongoing desire to change those special discretionary funds, or to handle the special project fund in a different way starting next year, that's what we want to hear today and next week, so that we can go back and reconsider and have a better idea of what we should come back with after that.
I remember the block parties, but I don't remember it was that nodding of all heads at the time that came up. I don't think that, I do remember it at the council meeting, at a work session.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to.
But I did not get that interpretation on this budget around. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to at least keep it on there just to talk about it going forward. We can always say no later, but I'd be curious to see where it were to fall in the rest of the budget.
Right, and we do have that at the back of the materials you received. You have the status report on all of those items that were discussed in the budget retreat. Not all of them, could be addressed in the time frame we have. I know the research was going on with the other cities about other city practices.
Okay.
I haven't seen the full summarization of those results.
Okay.
But those will not fall aside. We will complete those follow-ups from the retreat. But some of them won't happen in this term. Kind of like looking at the big picture of our facilities needs. It's obviously not going to be addressed in this time window.
Yeah, and I bring those two up because I was looking at it, the 11 and 12, that we were going to get a city manager's update today or next week. So that's why I was wondering about it. So I'm sure we'll get it soon. So thank you.
Molly?
I had hoped that we would have our retreat, and that would have been one of the topics we would have discussed, that and the community funding as well, because it's something that we as a council need to decide how we want to continue doing all of this. And while we started part of the conversation at the budget retreat, I don't think it was really meant, or not meant, I don't think it was really given enough time and attention that it was really something that we wanted to talk about. So that's my thought.
That's a good observation. I think it's.
Joe?
Yeah, to follow up on Councilmember Hampton, I think one of the things that we were talking about was, does it constantly get drained down, or does it go back up to whatever that number was? We never finished that conversation. And I think that's something as a council we probably have to have. But my gut tells me is that if there's something that we want to do, there are other contingency funds out there, one in the manager's office and somewhere else.
Which we've done in the
that
past.
we can
So it's
actually
not
tap.
anything we haven't
But
done
we still
before.
haven't decided that one particular fund on whether that's going to constantly go down to zero because we never replace it, or whether we replace it at the end. I don't think we've ever finished that discussion.
No.
Well, there's two different discussions, actually.
And that's also, we took the speed bumps out of that for one of the neighborhoods because there was no money budgeted for it, and it came out of our
Yeah, right. We
our
paid
money,
for it, yeah.
and we wanted to do that because it was giving back to the residents.
Well, we can still do that with our budget. So on some of these things, I'm not sure what this block party, the cost, but Sherry?
My question is, how much is left in that fund, and what did it start out as? I don't remember the exact amount.
Don't recall what it started out at. I think it was in excess
It
of
was
200,000.
250, and I think
yeah.
it was because we had.
What are we
And
down to?
Are we down to, do you know, Joe, off the top of your
I think we ought to put it back
down
up
to
to 250.
It
I
started
think it
at
was
250.
162 at the beginning of this year. Do you have a budget?
really
So
conversation,
if we
yeah.
wanted to raise it, when do we tell you? I mean, I'm not asking you to do
Right.
that because I'm not asking you to do anything.
Right.
But my question is, if we wanted to raise it back up to the 250 or whatever it was,
Mm-hmm.
when do we let you know?
This is what these meetings are for, is for us to get a sense of if there's something that we're recommending that isn't meeting the goals or the desires of the council, this is the time for us to talk about that. And so if there's a desire to establish that fund at $250,000 a year every year and just increase it to that dollar amount, we can do that. We just need to understand what your priorities are, and we'll have to go back and take responsibility to come up with a way to move forward with your recommendations.
Bring up the details.
So when you say that it's now, the time frame on that, this is probably not the forum in which to have that discussion. So how does it look in the schedule coming up that we would have within the time frame you could make some changes if council wanted to continue this discussion? Just ask that.
I would, we hope to by, their current schedule is to meet today and then to meet next Monday. And we have identified that there could be the need for another meeting to go through this process. And then we want to be prepared to recommend a tentative budget to you. When that happens, that is scheduled to happen in May, so we'd have to resolve it in the next few weeks. I would also remind you that Councilman Pizzillo is correct. There's other sources to tap. Should there be a
agree with you.
desire, it is,
We've done that in the past. That's
Right.
how we've settled all of this.
right.
So I can't imagine we can't
Here.
do it.
I don't
Yes,
know.
Just a moment. Joanne?
Well, I guess there were two separate council funds that we discussed that evening. And one of them was the one that we used for the speed humps, that we've used for, the white tanks conservancy. We've used occasionally, that has the 162,000, whatever. And then we discussed individual council discretionary funds that can be used for seed planting of different groups, whatever it may be. I mean, we've had every single year that we go to the Arizona League of Cities, we all say, how come our youth commission isn't here? There are things that we, and then we don't attack it. And so then, those are items that, comes back and it's like, oh, that's right. Why didn't we put that into the budget? And I think it's something that, really engages our youth and continues on. And so we lose sight sometimes of where is that in the conversation? If we didn't have some of these just throw everything, the kitchen sink type of, discussion, throw everything in there and see what people are thinking about and what they'd like to see change. But that was one of the other things, and we didn't finish that conversation. And so, and it's easy for me to say these things because I want you guys to be able to do these things and future councils to be able to do these things. I want you guys to have a raise. I mean, there's things that are really, that need to happen, that those conversations in these next couple of years need to continue to happen. But to have seed money to be able to do, and I think, it was even thrown out, maybe it's $1,500 because right now I think we're at $7 or something like that. But it helps, generate some of those. As you said, Wally, you spent money for bringing all the ministers together or whatever. I mean, there's things like that, So they're
Jerry?
two different conversations.
For the youth commission, we could use our $162,000 for that, right?
Sure.
Okay, I think what happens is we have always kind of forgotten about that pot, honestly, and that's why I think we just kind of forget about it. And so we don't budget it. When we have these ideas, we don't think about it. So I think we need to.
So maybe our discussion is to discuss within the budget of what we have.
Got
in-
162 still.
But it would be nice to have 250 or a set amount we would know every year and
But
let it
it
go
always,
back up to what
maybe
it
not bring
is.
it up to 250 in 1 year, maybe over 2 years
Yeah.
bring it up, since it's been a couple years. But
Yeah.
yeah, before it gets too far down and then it's a bigger hit to bring it up.
Yeah.
Brandon?
Yeah, and I don't know, to Joe's point, I don't know the limitations of the other funds and how flexible this fund is.
I'm sorry, you got to.
I don't know the limitations of the other funds and what the limit, and what this fund would be different than those funds.
You
Can we
use.
do,
Yeah.
can we do speed bumps from the manager's fund? Can we do a youth
Yeah,
council
yeah,
from the
well, you probably
manager's
don't
fund?
know.
Can
Yeah,
we?
we do that.
That's something, I don't know what the restrictions are. So that's just, that might be just on my part.
Yep.
So maybe, like to everybody's point, maybe that fund doesn't need to be there, and we tap from the manager's fund. We still have that same control that we would with this fund. If not, then something that auto-populates into a fund, if we're going to keep it, that it just auto-populates, whatever that number is that we decide to
How
auto-populate.
could we get there
So-
for the count?
And it
for the
caps at
project?
250,
All right, I
whatever we
gotcha.
get there. Whatever we look at, it just seems like a good option of a fund for us for those big projects that pop up, like, for example, speed bumps and things like that make a direct impact now for somebody as opposed to going through a longer, drawn-out 5-year CIP process. So.
Well, and I don't even know if we've used our fund each year, how much we've left over in the fund.
So it started the year at 162,000, and you used 25,000 this year on the Conservancy. In the prior year, I think you had one use, which I believe was the veterans thing. So it's another fund that if you want to look at that, it's similar to what we did with the city manager's contingency. We provided you the history of uses, so it may also be something that you want to look at.
Yeah, that would
the
be
history of
helpful.
your own use and
Okay,
and
yeah,
And
I
then
think that's.
also, to Joanne's part as well about the discretionary, each individual council's fund. I mean, I do support that, but like I said, all of these are great over and above. It depends on what our budget ends up being like, if we can do some extra things. But I think having the seed money is important. And to your other part about future councils and raises and all kinds of different things like that are all different conversations, so.
Okay,
And could
Wally, go ahead.
Could you also let us know what other pots are there? I mean, we know the city manager has a pot, but who else has money set aside or something? I just know that whenever we were talking about the community paramedicine funding, the city manager magically came up with $150,000 from somewhere to fund it for this year. So maybe he took it out of his budget. I don't know. I don't remember. But I just would like to know, just so that we know if an opportunity comes up and we don't have the money in our budget, what else could we use? I mean, it's not like you tell us every day, okay, we have this pot, y'all can spend it, and you have this pot and you can spend it. So we don't really know what's there.
In terms of the budget, when we had the budget retreat, we got a clear message that we had too many contingencies out there. So we have established the city manager's contingency at $500,000 a year. We eliminated the FMLA and the retirement payout contingencies and won't be using, those needs would come from the city manager's contingency. In the CIP, we have a CIP project contingency. There's been a use or two of that this year. So there will always, if we continue the practice we're following in this year and that we're recommending for next year, you will have some kind of contingency available in the CIP to deal with unanticipated needs or cost increases. So something like the speed, if there's a need to put in speed bumps and sidewalks or something like that, you could use that CIP contingency to do something like that. And then, at this point in time, we would be carrying over 137 in the City Council Project Reserve. There are other methods, if we came upon something that we just absolutely had to do. We haven't exercised the practice of using the ending our increase in our beginning balance in the current year. We always plan it to be spent in the next year. If there was some highly desired need, we could deal with something like that. So that we have the ability to deal with issues as they come up, but the preference would be the city manager's contingency, the city council contingency, or the capital projects special reserve fund would be the primary sources. There was an interest we heard during the budget retreat to carry over the drought contingency that's established in water, so we'll go ahead and include that with the carryovers. And then there was one other thing that in terms of the community paramedicine funding, that was handled in last year's budget process. So it was part of the discussion that happened in the budget process. So it happened in the process of balancing the budget. It didn't come out of any contingency. It was part of the budget process. And those funds have not been expended this year, and it's my understanding there's an intent to carry over part or all of those funds for that purpose.
So we don't need to budget another line for them?
Not if there's an intent to carry it over.
Okay.
Joanne?
One question, and I know this is kind of off the wall, but just for memory, the survey's going on of our citizens right now, correct? But we won't have the answers until May-ish. Is that?
Right. They're probably not timely for this budget process. They'd be timely for the next budget process.
Unfortunate.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll just set aside $1 million for them, right? Okay. Thank you.
You do good work in the legislature. Maybe we'll have something, huh?
Yeah.
Where are we on this? Joe?
Yeah, to me, I think the only discussion that probably can't be covered, even though it'd probably be nice to have that our line item increase is the one that Councilmember Osborne mentioned as far as the individual, because that's an individual selection process, not necessarily one that we pull from,
Correct.
So that's one at some point council will have to have a discussion, because if I recall, there was a council member that didn't even want it. So, but that's that individual's choice. But we probably need to have that discussion to see if you want to do something with that, because right now it's what, 700? 750? So that one would probably make sense if council agreed to raise it, because that's an individual selection. They're the ones that make that decision as opposed to this consortium of the ones. So I don't know where that ends up getting discussed, but at some point we probably want to throw that on, just to have a talk about that.
Julie?
Thank you. I was just going to add that what we'll do after tonight's session, since we do have another one on Monday, is we'll take all of this feedback, the special events ban, the council contingencies, and then the special council fund, and we'll come back with some strategies. One more?
And the
One
youth
more.
commission.
Yeah, the 75-year anniversary.
Isn't that in there of 20?
Is that in there too? Is it separated out? This is supplemental request or an initial submission for adding large events per strategic plan. Supplemental listing will show budget retreat reference.
It was in the
There's-
CIP.
we have
I think.
There's a request in the CIP. There is a request for a public art project associated with the 75th
Right.
Yeah, I
anniversary.
saw that. I know that included a.
There, you also talked last time about a heritage event, and one of the things that's being funded is a special, that's being recommended is that special events coordinator and seed money to come up with 2 events. It could be potential that could be a source of something like a celebration that might be an ongoing heritage event, as you discussed previously.
And then one item of clarification on the Youth Commission, was that to the Arizona League Conference or the?
Yes.
The Arizona League Conference, okay, thank you.
And NLC if it comes to Phoenix.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah, if they come here.
Yeah. If they come here.
Yeah, Buckeye brought like 6 kids to DC.
Well, now that might be, that might be doable for the Nash. That might be a conversation we have to have because LA would be doable to.
Sure. And that could
take
come
them.
out of,
That would be a very doable conference.
November of this year.
Yeah.
and I saw P and Z training was in there.
Would everybody start talking in the microphones, please?
I said, I saw planning and zoning training, there was some funds in there for that. That was good.
Right, and that's, so any other things on the mayor and council budget?
Lower food tax, that'll make me happy.
And you want a party van.
Oh,
Party.
All right, I think everybody okay for her to, okay,
All righty.
yeah, go.
So the city clerk budget is $960,200. They have 6 positions in their department. Just a reminder that their base budget includes an election that will be an every other year expenditure out of their base budget. And of the supplementals they requested, there's a recommendation to fund the replacement of the agenda management software.
Mayor?
Granicus?
Yes, Sherry.
Can I ask a question on that? You know what, maybe I've just been here too long and it seems like it's been not that long since we got the last one. Is this going to be an update or did that one just not work? And how long it didn't seem like it was that long ago that we got that last one.
I believe,
Yeah.
I believe the intent is to explore options that are out there. It could very well be an update to the existing product, or it could be a whole new product. And but it's the first step is to do a survey of what are the products and what would meet our needs, and then go from there to determine if it's just an upgrade or a replacement effort.
Okay, because it didn't seem like that we've had that one that long, and I know we've had lots of problems with it. So if anybody remembers when we had to vote with it and it didn't work. So, okay, thank you. I just was curious. Yeah.
Okay? All right, go forth.
City manager's office has a $4.9 million budget. There's 22 positions in that department. It includes communications, intergovernmental. The risk function was moved to the city manager's office in this year's budget. So that means that they're responsible for the risk reserve fund, which covers uncovered liability claims.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was
We
going
just- the air
to, it's getting
conditioning just
extra.
got
I'm
done,
even
it's
getting a little cool.
Okay, go ahead, sorry. Sherry?
I have a question on that one too. Again, it seems like we just did it a while ago. I see updated website. Yeah, we just rehauled it and it's not that friendly, so I'm not sure what this update is going to be.
I think that would be to make it more friendly, and so I believe that we've heard the comments about the website and would like to make improvements to it. And if the Invisio, I don't know if you were commenting on the Invisio as well, that's been funded on a one-time basis, and now it's to fund it on an ongoing basis.
And the website then, would that help us get a mobile app that actually is user-friendly?
I believe that's the intent.
Yeah, the mobile app isn't used.
Because you'll make me very happy if you say yes, that we're getting a good mobile app that works on Apple.
I want to make you happy.
So, yes.
Thank you.
So the update primarily is going to take a look at the website and make it more mobile friendly. We did roll it out 4 years ago, and so a lot has changed within the 4 years. As you know, probably most of you also look at websites on your mobile phone. So how do we work with the vendor that created our website Vision, go back to them and say, can we make it more mobile friendly? Another feature that is more popular now than it was 4 or 5 years ago when we rolled this out was voice activation. So when you ask Siri, what are the special events happening in Goodyear, how does that pull up and how does that work with our website? So those are going to be the main updates that we're going to be looking at for the website.
Can we ask Alexis too?
Alexa.
Yes,
Google.
Alexa and
I'm good. I
Siri
think
and,
that's
and all,
great.
all the ladies that respond.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
City manager. There's only.
All right. We'll move on to the Legal Services Department.
Just a moment. Everybody ready? We're going on? Okay? All right, now. go
So
ahead.
Legal Services has a $1.7 million budget, and they have 10 positions that covers both the civil and the criminal areas, and they did not request any supplementals.
Okay, so that's why it's not in there.
All right.
Question?
I'm just saying that's why it's not in here. Is because
Correct, if they didn't request any supplementals,
any.
they're
I
not
didn't, I'm
listed.
missing a page. Okay.
Nope.
Thank you.
All righty. And for the Finance Department, their budget is $3.9 million. They have the financial services, they do the customer service for the utilities area, and then do the debt issuance and those types of things for the city. They have 31 positions, and their major project that they're working on right now is the financial system replacement project, and they also requested no supplementals. All righty, the Information Technology Department has a $5 million general fund budget with 23 positions. They are responsible for the IT hardware asset management fund, so that's the fund that replaces existing hardware citywide. Their supplementals are to convert long-time use of one-time resources for a contracted technician position that provides support services throughout the city. The recommendation is to fund that as a full-time city position on an ongoing basis. And then to do an upgrade to OpenText and add software consulting services. And that department is supporting the financial system and a number of other existing in-progress technology software replacements, as well as a number of new projects are being recommended in this budget.
Brandon?
Is that a general question? I think you might have already answered it. So when I see a position on here, that also includes all their benefits, correct?
Correct. We've assumed that the position is, we budget positions and benefits assuming full employment. So if the position, in this case, the position could be filled on July 1 if they're going to hire the existing position, which I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah.
But it's the type of position that has the potential to be filled quickly.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the ongoing cost. That includes the whole package.
Yes.
So, okay.
So yeah, if you look at supplementals, and you'll see some supplementals that have both ongoing and one-time cost. The ongoing cost of positions involved would include the salary and the benefits, if there's phone service or something like that. The one-time position would include, if they need a phone, if they need a desktop of some type, or a vehicle.
Yeah.
All right.
Go ahead.
The Human Resources Department also has a $1.7 million budget. They have 11 positions, 10 are full-time, and this is the first department we'll come upon that now also shows having part-time positions. You funded a high school intern program as part of those FTEs, and then they have administrative position that's part-time. And their budget is, their base budget has been reduced because of the introduction of self-insurance. Some of the plan administration costs used to be in their budget. Those are now in the health insurance trust, and this department's responsible for that health insurance trust.
Joe?
First, I appreciate putting in the supplemental on the executive coaching. The question I have is the $25,000, you think enough to do the job? I guess Lyman will tell me that. No, it's more than just a coach. It's to train the executives, but go ahead.
Yes, this will be a starter to get the program up and running. We hope to use this to augment where we would normally have mentoring programs and other programs, but we think it'll be enough to get the program up and running, make sure that it's achieving the success that we want, and then move from there.
So you're going to have some matrix on some types of measurables when you design this program, or what you expect to get out of it, and what results you're looking for as a result of the program?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, I'll be looking forward to seeing that. Thanks.
Sherry?
Oh, Lyman, sorry. So I kind of agree with Joe. That was my concern, because this is going to basically hopefully help keep our employees in-house and grow them from within, right? That's the goal here.
Absolutely. And also, I should also mention, along with our People Master Plan, the succession planning component. So as we identify the need to develop talent within, this will also help provide that as an additional resource.
Thank you. And I hope we get an update once you get it on board. That'd be great.
Joanne?
Wait, stay right there. I appreciate you defining this a little more, because, you know, if I'm citizen Joanne and I'm like, you have to have an executive coach, what are you having, hot yoga? I mean, what does that mean as a citizen? And so I think, and I don't know, because I don't remember, we used to have a trainer, and that trainer position had gone away, and that was a vital position. And we do have a trainer.
We still have someone who
correct?
oversees learning and development. We also have what we call a professional development series. So there's still ongoing programs for leadership development. This is a higher level of leadership development, targeted at director, manager level. And again, something that is going to provide a level of coaching that we currently aren't providing. Typically, an organization would provide that through a mentoring program where an executive is attached with someone else in a peer level or higher level. We don't have the capacity with all the things we have going on in the city. This provides us that additional capacity to provide that higher level mentoring and executive coaching on strategic level issues that an executive leader or an up-and-coming leader would need to be successful.
Well, and I think that, you know, as a goal that we gave the city manager was succession planning and building, and I think that's key to it. It's just, I like you to define it a little bit. While you're sitting here, just other topic, because you may have said it at the previous meeting that I missed. I did not get to hear kind of the outcomes of our first full year of being self-insured. So I don't know if you were going to be giving an update on that, or you did.
We did provide an outcome. At present, the trust fund is doing very well. When we initially rolled out self-funding, or at least proposed the proposition of moving to a self-insured plan, we felt that it was going to take a couple of years to build our reserves. We're on target to build those reserves probably early in year 2. So things are moving well. The plans are functioning well. And again, I think that's also demonstrated by having another year with 0 cost increases on our health insurance. So we're pleased with how things are operating. We have our trust board in place, and they're providing great oversight as well.
Good, thank you.
It's probably the little word of executive coaching that's got everybody's attention.
We will provide a clear description.
Yes, please do.
In the materials that we publish for the budget. All righty, moving on. The non-departmental budget is $3.3 million of general funds. That's where we budget. There will also be carryovers associated with this program as well. The majority of what's budgeted there currently is the sales tax reimbursements that are part of existing development agreements and the city manager's contingency. And then the job credit money is typically carried over from year to year. And the impact fee program we're referring to is the $2 million program that was added in this year's budget. It's not reflected here, but we anticipate it will carry over into next year.
Joe?
Are we getting any results as a result of that impact fee program? I mean, is it producing any fruit? The whole idea was we did it to try to spur on some economic development with it. Is it working?
I don't know if it's probably too early to evaluate the effectiveness of it. I don't know if anybody else wants to.
Julie, how would you address that?
Does this refer to the $2 million that was set aside for the impact fee? To date, we've only had 3 companies that have qualified under the program. So one of the things that we're coming up on an executive session regarding economic development incentives, we will be reviewing that program in a little bit more detail.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
All righty. The next department is the police department. Their general fund budget is $25.1 million. They have 151 positions. And this is another department that had previously funding for part-time that we've now identified that it's 1.0 FTE a part-time. It's made up of 2 different activities. The supplementals recommended include adding a school resource officer position. And as Julie mentioned in her opening, we have not assumed that there's revenue in preparing this budget, but we understand there's ongoing conversation about funding from a school district. There's also a plan to do a significant software update in the police department, an upgrade to the security in some of their facilities, and then additional part-time staffing to provide backup for telecommunications and also for recruitment and internal affairs. Those are funded on a one-time basis. Some of those activities are currently going on, and we want to have assess better what the real needs are before we allocate an official ongoing budgeted part-time position for those. And
I had a question about the early acquisition of the police vehicles. I'm good with that. I'm just curious, are we looking in our city first and then looking external, whoever the bid process goes to?
So you're referring to the requested supplemental to early acquire vehicles, is that?
Correct, yeah. I'm okay doing it. I'm just curious if when we're bidding at the process, if we're looking in our city as well, and then also external.
We have procurement processes to follow for those items. I will note that that's not a funded supplemental. What we were hoping, the process we're trying to work through is it takes a while. There's certain dates by which you have to order vehicles to get them from the manufacturers. And so for the last couple of years, we've been able to work with dealerships that we are able to buy from our procurements. And we've been able to identify some vehicles on their lots that they were willing to hold for us so that when July 1 came and we had the funding, we could buy vehicles. What we'd like to do is get to a point where we can, they want to make sure they have the vehicles as soon as those new sworn positions come on. And what we were trying to do is predict, how many positions might be added in a coming year so that we could get the funding to start the procurement late in the fiscal year for the next year. But we just don't feel like we have the data yet to kind of pre-plan purchasing vehicles for positions we don't know if we're adding yet. There's not a plan out there right now to help us project that. So we'll continue our current process where we work with the dealerships, and then we're also working to authorize some of those procurements early once we know that you're comfortable with, for example, the positions that are included in the budget. We can go ahead and authorize the procurement to go forward as long as we wouldn't take delivery before July 1. So we're continuing to work. Fleet and their staff have done a really good job of working to get the vehicles as quickly as possible.
Holly?
I noticed that on the department request, they requested 12 positions, and the city manager's giving them 1.
Yes. And that.
So were the 12 positions squad members?
Chief, I'm sure, would be willing to respond to your questions about positions that may not have been
recommended. I don't want us to get behind again like we did or have been.
It's in your packet.
Well, I've been looking for it, to be
And
honest.
I guess on that, Mayor, can I ask?
Yes.
Oh, with him. It's because it's on what
she asked
law.
the
Yeah,
question.
right.
It's
It's
saying-
on that.
It's on that, all right.
Yeah.
And I have one too after that.
Because I noticed, especially with the police officer investigations assignment person, and narcotics. I mean, I know those seem very important 3 positions, but just as we've seen in caseloads in the past, where you start to get behind, it's extremely hard to get caught back up. So that's a tough one. Help us out with that.
Okay, Mayor and Council, good evening. So just the best way I can answer that, and some of the things going on in the police department right now, is that by June, we will have 10 additional patrol officers out working in the city solo. These are positions that we got this year. Obviously, it takes months and months and months to get them hired, trained, and out on their own. So that will put our patrol in a really good place when that happens. So that's 10 additional bodies. We also have some programs that will be coming online real soon, such as our online reporting. That will also take some of the call burden off patrol officers. So, the bottom line is our city is very safe. Our schools are safe. We have some of the best response times to emergency calls in the entire valley. The SRO position that's recommended is probably one with the most positive impact of all those positions. In addition, we have a great relationship with our community. We do 100 community policing events per year. So the bottom line is we'll be fine. We totally support the recommended budget of the one SRO position. So we'll be good.
Yes, Sherry.
And I appreciate that, Chief, and I think we are in a really good position, and you've done a very good job, and all your employees and officers, because the last couple of years I know we've been playing catch up for you. My concern is obviously you don't ask for fluff. You've never come before us and recommended anything that there wasn't a need for. And my concern is the heroin epidemic and the opioid epidemic. We're just seeing that, and we don't have this grand wall around Goodyear that keeps people out. And we've all seen the correspondence that you've been sending, and, we have a very safe city, but with our population growth, I would like to have a plan, because I think it's really important. The NET team and the narcotics are two, and I believe sometimes they kind of work hand in hand for neighborhood enforcement. I know Peoria has a great, and so does Phoenix, where they actually have officers. They actually come to the court. They pick individuals up as soon as they're left from jail, and so they don't reoffend, and they take them directly, like police directly to services. And it's a great, because it keeps the people who are reoffending from coming back. And I believe that's their NET or their community team that does that. So I would like to see if we can at least have in the conversation, to start moving forward, because I don't want to see us put your department and your officers in a position in 3 years because we didn't fund, if we could fund maybe one this year and one, so we can start getting that team together. If we could find it, and I don't know if it could be narcotics net or how you do it or with the task force, but if we could start kind of moving towards that, probably can't do all four at once, but if we can kind of incrementally put it on, what are people thought? Because I think we're going to need it, and I'd rather not have to have you come back in 3 years going, I need 5 officers. If we could kind of get them in.
Would you like to address that?
Yeah, so neighborhood enforcement team was actually a unit that was put into place about 6 or 8 months ago. It is a temporary assignment. They're actually in place today. And the good thing about them are that there are a uniform squad out there in police cars, but they also have the ability to do undercover work. They have those skills, they have that education on how to do that, and they can do that. They've been very successful. One of the problems that we had, or one of the challenges, was that, I may get calls from neighbors saying, hey, we've got activity going on in our parks. Other than sitting a patrol unit out there, which is not going to catch anybody or really be able to make an impact, this unit is something that can go in there and do whatever they need to do to take care of the situation. We had a string of car burglaries along the McDowell corridor. We had about 60 just in Goodyear, 150 throughout Avondale, Goodyear, and Phoenix. This unit was able to go in, do stakeouts for several weeks, able to catch those responsible, And then there was weeks worth of search warrants and different activity all over, which obviously you can't pull detectives off of their existing cases to do that kind of thing. It wouldn't really be applicable for a patrol officer to do that. So that's the kind of thing that they do. But what I'm saying is they are a temporary unit now. They came out of patrol, but they also supplement patrol. When they're out there working, if we have an emergency call, they're going to respond too. If we have a lot of calls holding, they're going to stop what they're doing. They're going to help patrol take those calls. So they're a resource both ways. And so they're temporary. They're going to remain temporary, and we will carry on with them, you know, as a unit in a temporary position.
Joe?
Did I read somewhere, Chief, and I thought I did, but I can't find it, the scanner for the license plates?
Yes.
Yes.
It's in here.
It's in there? Okay, I just missed it. We talked about that about 2 years ago, and I got a feeling it's going to pay dividends once you get that up and running. As far as identifying things, as opposed to somebody trying to identify it with a sheet of paper and a number where that's going to catch it all. So I'm glad to see that in there. The question I have is, and again, on the part-time that's been approved, you got .252 of them. Do you have somebody already doing it, or do you think you can find somebody to work a quarter of a week to fill that position? It doesn't seem like a whole lot. And then what is it, a half for an internal affairs investigator?
Yes. So we have had a part-time dispatch person for quite a while who can supplement our dispatch function. We have had a part-time person for quite a while doing some recruitment type background investigations and recruitment functions. The one thing we have identified is we need some assistance in internal affairs because it's not only just internal affairs, we have a low number of them, but it's the vehicle accidents, it's the lost and damaged property. All those things require investigations. And we have not brought that person on yet.
So you got to try to find somebody who's willing to work, what, a half a day or half a shift?
Yes.
Is that going to be difficult?
20 hours or less a week.
I know. Is that going to be difficult? Would that be a retired officer that want to do something like that?
There is a lot of interest out there.
Oh, is there? Okay. I just want to make sure that you have enough interest that you can fill these because it doesn't seem like a whole lot of time. And I'm just trying to figure who would fill that niche for a quarter but the quarter ones you've got covered. You're just going to add time to them. So they're good. It's the one that you have to recruit is the internal affairs one, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And again, I tend to agree. I want to make sure with some of this opiate issue that we don't fall behind. And I don't know, at some point, maybe, you know, do a plan presentation on how we plan on attacking that because, yeah, that can easily get out of hand real fast. So, thanks.
Joanne?
Agreed. Okay. One last item that I would be willing to give up the block party van for the Arizona Humane Society contract for animal cruelty. And I say that because obviously care about animals, we all do, but also there's been many times where you see a direct correlation between animal cruelty and domestic violence and child abuse and things like that. So to me, that $35,000 is really a very good item of impact. So unless it's being, and I know in the past we've had, is this something different than what we've done with that was animal control, that was animal cruelty. So I'm going to bat on that one. Tell me why I shouldn't then.
So we currently have a contract with animal control that takes care of everything, but it does not cover animal abuse. Or cruelty to animals. We have about 150, I believe, of those types of calls per year. We can handle them ourselves.
But you put it here for a reason.
So they're the experts, and that's what they do. But we can handle that ourselves, which is what we've been doing.
Any other questions? Joe?
I just think, is she asking, can you find 35,000? All right. I mean, just ask.
Sherry?
And that was mine. Can we can we look to see if we can start something with the drugs and the net team to get another officer there so you can have somebody and start building that? So we're not pulling from patrol and having some consistency?
Mayor, council member, as we've indicated early on in this process, we're here to listen to you and really understand if we've missed on some of your priorities. And
I think
we'll go
drugs
back
are a
and-
concern, opioids
Yep.
are a concern. I think we have several council people that have been going to different meetings, observing it, and I hear daily of different areas in the cities, different cities, taking action on this, and I think we see it on television. And so today at a meeting that I was at, I discovered something about opioids that you can tell by a strand of hair,
Oh, yeah.
which I had no idea, and a lot of other things. But I said, well, then why are we doing that other test? And he said, because of the cost of whatever it is of the testing. So they didn't go elaborate into that, so I didn't know. But we've talked about drugs some time ago. Wasn't that drug and my concern. And it's very complicated, but I also think that we do need a position of starting of, okay, how are we going to handle it? What process could we use? What is the best method? How can we use our officers and still cover the city and all the things we're doing? And so I just think it's it's United States wide and out of country. And it's not stopping. It's still coming over the border. So I think the city has to take responsibility. And I don't know what that is. I don't know how to start that, but I do think it's been a subject that's been on the notepad for a long time. And it's not going to go away. It's just going to get worse.
So if I may, you can clearly tell, especially going through a department like the police department, how difficult it is, in a growing city to meet all of the needs. And I agree. I don't think any of the supplementals put together by the departments, are frivolous. I think that these are all future planning. These are all items that we need to look at, whether it's today or, moving into the future. But I think what I'm hearing from council is an interest in us brainstorming with the chief on how to look for a narcotics officer, and then perhaps also a Humane Society contract. So what we'll do is we'll get together and see how we can get creative and see if we can meet those needs now or in the immediate future.
And we do partner with those cities, this discussion, and we so we're doing that already. Okay, all right. That would be great. So everybody got that?
We take a break.
Yeah, I was going to do this. What I was going to do is I wanted to finish the police. Are we just about done? And stop there, and then we'll go to the fire.
So can I ask the city manager a question? Are you saying find an officer or give him another position? Because I'm saying I think he needs another position because his officers are already stretched thin and they're doing 3 or 4 jobs apiece.
So what I'd like to do is work with the chief and then also look at the other budget conversations that we're having. So, for example, we have fully funded in the proposed budget an SRO position at 100%. We believe that we're going to be receiving money
from the schools.
from reimbursement from the schools, so that perhaps creates a half a position. And so like one of the things that we can do behind the scenes is say, okay, well, maybe we can't hire an officer to start for July 1st, but maybe we can hire someone to start January 1st, which is a half a year. And that, there's just some things that we can do when we go back after the entirety of the conversation to see how do we put back together the pieces that are most important to council.
Okay.
You want any more discussion on this before is this the last?
Just to let you know that the police department is also responsible for the impound fund that pays for one position, that's restricted to traffic purposes, and that the supplementals recommendations also include GO bonds to do the advanced pre-design work on the phase 2 operations facility, so we can be ready to go with that project when funding's available to move forward.
Any questions on this? Chief, I know we put you in a bad position. I can say I didn't. I can hear. But, I'm just teasing. But it was necessary, and it's very difficult for you to come up as the chief with the city manager sitting there and the staff behind you who have asked for different positions. So I thank you for being honest about that. But it is an issue. And so we really appreciate it. All right, we're going to take a break, okay, before we do the fire. How about 10 minutes? Is that good? Yeah. All right, you got 10 minutes.
You're tired.
All right.
You ready?
Yes, we're ready. You're on.
All righty. We will move on to the fire department, which has a $21.9 million general fund budget. And I didn't mention earlier, and I should have, that the positions and the dollar amounts we're showing here do reflect the supplementals that are recommended. So that's with the 14 positions added in it. They have 123 full-time positions, and they're another department that has some ongoing use of part-time that we're converting to full-time FTEs. They also have an asset management fund that they're responsible for, and the projects that they're working on, or the bigger projects they're working on in the CIP, are the Fire Station 181 replacement and the EMR fire station. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, we have the fire apparatus coming up for those two or the EMR and the West Goodyear fire station. So in addition to the 14 positions that we've talked about, we're also including in the supplementals for the fire department an active shooter response equipment. They've had some training in that area, so this is some of the equipment associated with that. Some medical dispensing system, Knox box that's associated with keys, and an extra set of safety wear. And then in addition, the CIP also includes removing carpet throughout all of the stations as a safety-related item. And that's kind of a high-level summary of what's included for the fire department.
Any questions? All right, go ahead.
All righty. Municipal court has a $1.4 million general fund budget. That includes 11.3 positions, 0.3 part-time FTEs associated with the pro tem judge. They have several small restricted funds that they also manage that are restricted by the state court system. In terms of supplementals, they requested 2 positions to deal with increasing workloads. The budget is recommending that we fund one on an ongoing basis and the other one on a temporary one-time basis in order to evaluate what the real, to get an evaluation of when it's appropriate to add that other position on a full-time basis. We're also recommending some one-time, part-time pro tem judge additional resources associated with the contract of the current judge, so we are sure that we can cover any time that he's away, so that if he's on training or something like that. And then there is a study related to some security improvements that are an ongoing effort in the court. They're part of a mandate. So what we're funding now is the study to then recommend the actual security improvements in the CIP and FY20. And then finally, there's a recommendation to update the signage on the building so it's clear where the court is. There's some confusion about Justice Center versus the municipal court. And then to do some remodeling of a workstation in the customer service area.
Questions? Joe?
Just a general question. You have one temporary and one full-time. When you have a temporary, I guess they can always be gone the next year because it's temporary, it's one-time funding. So do you go to a contract service that you get people coming in and out? Because I would think it'd be kind of hard hiring a temporary that's good for 1 year. Because in essence, that's what it is.
Mayor, council member, we end up hiring both those types of positions. We've had situations where we have been able to hire a temporary city employee who they're hoping probably that we might make it a full-time position in the future. But we also have situations where we hire contractors. Yeah. I'm not sure what the court would do in this case. I do know that court positions require specialized training, so it may be a situation where they do want to bring in a temporary city employee. If there's a desire to have a specific response, I'm sure Crystal could.
The only reason I say you hire somebody temporary, there's no guarantee that that position would be filled again because we're using one-time money. I would think it's difficult. I don't know, I'm going to ask the person who's going to come up and answer the question for me. Difficult hiring somebody on a temporary basis with specialized skills that's not turnover, so as soon as they find a permanent job, they're up and out the door, and you got to hire another one to fill that position. Just tell me if I'm wrong on that.
No, you're correct, council member. And what we did in collaborating with, through the budget process and receiving the recommendation for the temporary is we adjusted our plan for the year and where we would place this individual to fill the need that we are needing in the court. That could lend assistance to duties that don't need special training.
Okay.
And we would focus our specialized training on the recruitment of the ongoing position.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. Oh, Molly?
Yes, this is just for the the next fiscal year.
Any other questions? All right, go ahead.
Alrighty, economic development, they have about just over $1 million budget and 6 positions. They're administering, I failed to include on this slide that they're administering the job credit and the impact fee program, and they did not request any supplementals in this year's process.
Questions? Brandon?
There's nothing that we can do to add or do better there, or you think we're doing well as it is, or I don't know, maybe is the incentive program rolled into this too, right?
Yeah, if I could jump in.
Kind of a
the-
general question, I guess a general
Yeah,
question.
the retail incentive program is part of this department, but it's the money for it is in the non-departmental area, so that's why you don't see it here. But to your broader question, of course, we're doing a recruitment for a new economic development director. So I think for this year, that the budget, I think, will be as is. We bring a new director in, have an opportunity to, evaluate the landscape. Of course, with the city manager's contingency, if there's opportunities, that we see to jump sooner than next budget year, we'd have the opportunity to do so. But for now, our priority is to get a new economic development director in.
Okay.
Joanne?
On that subject, so I know that you said we've had 3 projects for the retail incentive program. If say 3 months from now and you have the new ECDev director and you guys look at the full program and you say, you know what, this isn't panning out to what we wanted to be, or maybe the new director has another idea to use it, are those funds, because it's in non-departmental, are they transferable to other things? I'm just asking. It may be fine. You guys may decide it's fine, but I'm just asking the question if in the future because it was for a 2-year program, correct?
Yes, in practice, you funded that for 2 years at $2 million. The practice has always been that when you fund something for a specific purpose, if we have a better idea for how to do it or we found another way to do it, we come to you and we say, you authorize this, we'd like to use it for a different purpose. So that would certainly be possible next year once we have that kind of input.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Wally, do you still have a question?
Yeah, I think you just answered it, because if we get a new economic development director and she wants more than, or he wants more than 6 positions, there would be an opportunity to have that conversation once it was determined that's what they needed, right? Because you said we're funding this for 2 years, so.
Mayor, council member, we funded the $2 million is one-time money. So that is where you'd have some flexibility. If you wanted to fund something on an ongoing basis, we would still be able to look at that mid-year. It just wouldn't be quite as straightforward as taking part of that $2 million and adding positions. But there's always other opportunities to address something like that.
Okay, thank you.
No questions? All right.
No, I was just going to add that when you hire the new person, hopefully there's a plan, a goal, measurables, so that you've got something to kind of go off of to see what the actual results are at the end. And if they aren't what you think they're going to be and you need to shift those funds, then you always have that option.
All right, go ahead.
I took my drink too late. Development Services Department has a $3.4 million general fund budget, and they have 22 positions. And as was noted earlier, this recommendations include to fund some training and iPads to be used by the Planning and Zoning Commission. There is, I believe, $350,000 included for the one-time expenses associated with inspection and plan review and those types of activities in order to keep up with the ongoing development levels. There's a bike and pedestrian study There is funding to deal, we're getting ready, we'll be looking at a new building code in the future, so there's funding to begin to prepare for that. And then there's funding to do a study of space needs in the current environment, a small study, and then to do some minor remodeling in a workspace where there's some significant inefficiencies right now.
Any questions? Joe?
If my calc is right, there's about 400,000 in contractual services in this department for inspections and, I guess, safety, if I'm looking at it right. My only concern is that sometimes when we do the economic development and we're negotiating, we have the wherewithal internally to do the job with no additional cost. My only question is, I'd like to add the caveat, if the contractual services is needed to meet those speeded up building plan reviews or anything, whether it's I'm going to say the same thing for engineering, that we're notified in the discussion that we're tapping this money, so it really is costing us additional money to do what we're doing. Does that make some sense? I just want to make sure that this is routine, what's needed to do, and if we're using it to try to speed up something for economic development, that we know that, because sometimes we'll say, well, we've got the resources and we don't need any, okay? Because we have it, and this is a resource, so it depends on how you interpret.
In this case, these resources are needed based on current development levels, so this is not a situation where we're recommending something that we aren't sure, that we don't feel we need. This is concern about adding full-time staff right now, but it's an ongoing need, or it's a need based on current development levels.
And I appreciate, I'd rather use contractual services and staff, because this is an area that if things start speeding up or slowing down, it gives you some flexibility from a staffing standpoint. Yeah, I just want to make sure if we're using half of it or 3/4 of it, but we can tap another quarter of it to get, to augment the additional speeding up of a process for a project, you just let us know that, that's all.
Okay. Christopher?
Mayor, Council, Councilman Pizzillo, I was just going to add or clarify for you that the supplemental request that we put in for contract services is primarily for building inspections for the field staff. Currently, we have 4 authorized inspectors, and we are now, because of the permitting, primarily in single-family homes, we are running 3 contract inspectors. So 75% of our inspection staff is contract, and that's where this focus is, because we spend about $30,000 a month on building inspection contract labor, and so that 350, 380 number that we're discussing is to fund 3 contract inspectors for the entire next year.
Okay, and again, I appreciate that approach as opposed to hiring full-time, because it's an area that has a tendency to fluctuate depending on the demand for services, so I appreciate that approach.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions? Molly?
So, Christopher, are we taking into consideration the conversation that we had at council recently about the construction sales tax, when Lori recommended that, or suggested that perhaps we use a 5 million figure, but we dropped it to 4.5? So are you telling us now that the construction has picked up where we need additional staff?
Permitting activity has picked up across the board. Right now, there's close to 3 million square feet of industrial space under construction. We have apartment complexes under construction coming through the process. And last month, we issued 139 new single-family permits, which is the highest number I've seen since I've been here. So those are all really good numbers, and we're really proud of that and what our team in our building, including engineering and economic development, work together to help. In terms of your specific question, I would say that we haven't really had much discussion about that 500,000 delta in construction sales tax. We don't really recognize that for the development activity. Our revenues come from permitting, not from sales tax.
Correct. And I'm really excited that you want to use another system to speed up the plans. the more we can help get the plans in and out by internet or however we do it, the happier the builders are and the happier people are to do business with us.
Yes, ma'am.
So that'd be great.
We're in the process of deploying, with IT's help, project docs and building safety. So
Yes,
that'd
great.
be a great step.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, go forth.
All righty. Engineering. This is a multi-funded department, so there's a couple of slides. They have a $3.6 million general fund budget, which pays for 23 positions. They have some technology improvements. They also have temporary and/or contracted services for inspection and plan review in their supplemental recommendations, and they have a software upgrade. And noting that they're a department that's supporting the existing and the new CIP projects on a citywide basis. They also have the HERF fund, which is the state highway tax revenue. The expenses in that area are $7.9 million. Of course, some of that is supported by the general fund. They have 18 positions in that area. And again, just a reminder that they have the pavement management program, which is one of our asset management programs. It's funded different than the others in that we just fund an ongoing amount because they can manage to that level. It's not like a fire where you have to replace a pumper. You can't just suddenly absorb that increase in something like fleet. Their supplementals include an intelligent transportation system analysis to support the traffic signal system. You see lots of new traffic signals being added and fiber optic projects. They have some right-of-way funding to do some right-of-way weed abatement. We're also piloting the use of contracted barricading services instead of having city staff and equipment in the streets and putting those kinds of equipment out. And then there's a pedestrian crossing in their program. And then the last fund there, I'll go through that. They have the Arizona Lottery Fund. They direct the transit programs. And they supplementals include adding Sunday and holiday Zoom service.
Any questions? Molly?
Well, I thought we had a conversation at the budget retreat that we wanted to talk about possibly, instead of expanding the Zoom, possibly having dial-a-ride for the seniors, for people who have no transportation. And I thought we were going to have another conversation on that. Did I miss a meeting where we talked about expanding the Zoom and how many people ride it and all of that good stuff?
I do not know if that has come forward yet.
We're going to get the answers, though.
All the answers.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilmember, Vice Mayor. So we are actually coming forward on May 14th with a transit work session where we're going to talk about dial-a-ride and a lot of other opportunities. We're going to have Valley Metro here with us to explain some of the options that some of the other municipalities have been utilizing and some of the pros and cons with those. Probably most predominantly, there are some new opportunities out there that Valley Metro are expanding into that we would like for you all to consider. However, with the Zoom, I do have numbers. They have continually risen. I know there's been some comments before about ridership, but I do have those numbers here with me this evening if you'd like to take a look at those. And then the Sunday and holiday Zoom service is an addition to what we already have for that.
We are interested. Do you have those?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can we get the Elmo up?
And what you see across the top is we had a full year of FY17, fiscal year 17. The bottom two columns are because we have not had a full year of 18. I'm showing the average daily boardings for the Zoom in the blue columns. And so as an example, in July, there was 22 boardings within per day.
In Goodyear.
Yes, yes. Okay. And then 16 in the prior year. So Again, you see an increase. I did notice in January and February, it was down a little bit from 17 to 18, but overall, we're seeing an increase in the ridership.
Any other questions for her? Sherry?
Where are the stops in Goodyear? Because I know one's at the park and one's on McDowell.
And I actually don't have that in front of me, but there are two on McDowell. There's one by the Target, and then there's one by the hospital. And then we have one in between Goodyear Park on Litchfield and McDowell. So there's another stop there.
It currently runs Sundays and holidays. It just doesn't come to Goodyear on those days?
That is correct.
Okay, so
this is an
it
expansion.
does the rest of the route on Sundays and holidays now, so we just bring it to us.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I do, but not about the Zoom.
All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, just
Joanne?
one. How many people can ride in the Zoom? How many does that hold?
Not very many, I forgot.
It's a party bus.
And I apologize, I don't have that number, but I can certainly get it for you.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking forward to the whole, work
Sherry?
session on.
I'm sorry. Sherry?
Oh, I just want to thank you for putting in the crosswalk up by the Presidio, and I think that they'll be very appreciative, the residents up there.
Any other? Thank you very much.
I got a separate.
Oh, Brandon?
Not a Zoom, but an engineering one.
So do I. Go ahead with him first.
Brandon?
So I was looking at, does the bridge maintenance and repairs recommendation, is that for Estrella and Cotton, or are those other bridges?
We
Like
have
small ones?
Thank you, council member. And we have a number of bridges throughout the city that we are responsible for the maintenance of. And every 2 to 3 years, we have ADOT do an inspection. They provide us with that information. Much of the items they've identified for maintenance we absorb within our budget, and this was to maybe do a more wholesale look at it. However, we're absolutely able to deal with the most critical of those needs with our ongoing budget.
Joe?
On the one-time contractual costs, I appreciate, looks like a little over $500,000 for contractual, and is that currently probably the trend that you're spending? And again, I appreciate that as opposed to hiring new staff, because it's an industry that could be doing, various fluctuations. So the fact that using contractual, you don't have to worry about what happens if there's a slowdown in your staffing and that type of thing. So I appreciate that approach. But what kind of trend are we running right now with that?
Thank you, Councilmember Pizzillo. Currently, we have the 3 temporary inspectors in this fiscal year, so we're continuing that into the next fiscal year. So that's status quo on that side. For the plan review services, we had, I think it was $150,000 for plan review services, and we found ourselves a little bit short this fiscal. We're looking at other opportunities, so that's why we increased it to the $250,000 ask. And we're trending right now at about 40% higher for all of our plan reviews.
Okay. Is the $50,000 enough for a weed abatement, you think?
This is our first year, so that's a good estimate from our side. We've worked with the landscaping contractor as well as Parks and Rec to see what they are costing for certain square footage. And so this is a good starting point for us, and it may very well be satisfactory.
Okay, thank you.
Joanne?
On the Canada Village drainage improvement, is that a possible CDBG grant opportunity for that area? I just throw that out there. I wonder if that is a possible.
And we can certainly look into that option the next go-around for CBDG. From our perspective, there are a couple different opportunities. Last year, or this current year, we had a study done for that whole northwest drainage region and some drainage issues that we have on some of our roadways. And so we're looking at the opportunities to come forward at some point in the capital program for consideration of some of those improvements. This was just one of those areas for the Canada Village to make sure that we protect that neighborhood. The other item is that we've been working very closely with the county on McDowell Road in that area. They're responsible for that road, and they've been adding some additional drainage swales along the roadway, which really helped out this year, and we did not have an incident as we've had in past years.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Rebecca.
All righty, and I see on this slide we have a little bit of stray information. Their engineering also has some CIP projects of their own besides managing the projects for other departments. They're responsible for the off-site work at the recreation campus. Those off-sites have also been pulled out along with the recreation campus projects, with the exception of the RID work due to the timing of the canal issues. They have a couple of streets projects, a fiber project, and 2 traffic signal projects included, and the next piece is a repeat that shouldn't be there. Any questions on their CIP projects?
All right, let's go to Parks and Rec.
Parks and Recreation's general fund budget is $8.6 million. They have in the general fund 49.7 positions. This is one of those areas I talked about, the swimming pool operations or summer programs would be an area where they have an ongoing need for part-time positions. This department is also responsible for the Parks Asset Management Program, which includes the parks and the rolling stock, as well as the right-of-way landscaping. And then they also have, their kind of big capital project is the recreation campus and some art projects. In terms of their supplementals, the recommendation includes the recreation supervisor. And again, this position is planned as part of the O&M costs of the recreation campus projects. By bringing this position on now, it'll free our current staff up to be able to really carefully manage that project and make sure we deliver a high quality, on time, on budget project. There is a special events coordinator and one-time seed funding for 2 events, and this is consistent with some of the new strategic goals. There's a number of additions associated with added right-of-way that requires maintenance, utilities, also adding weed control in the parks. So you'll notice we just mentioned some weed control. Different departments have responsibility for different parts of the city, so this is the weed control in the areas that Parks is responsible for maintaining. Also adding some funding to maintain the monument signs and the pool. There is some funding for public art maintenance, as well as a specific project to do some maintenance on the ZIZ. We have one-time funding to pilot an evening and weekend park ranger program.
Good idea.
And then some funding for some vacant property cleanup and repairs at the Foothills dugout.
Question before we go on. Yes, Joe?
Oh, just a general comment. I appreciate spending the money, make sure our community is pristine, especially the vacant property cleanup and some of the maintenance that you have in the right-of-way. So appreciate those efforts. You do a great job out there, so I appreciate you continuing those efforts. Park, Rec, keep it up.
Jerry?
And I want to echo that. I like the park ranger addition. I think that will be very helpful to, as we put more parks online and more recreational opportunities to reach out and get the message out what's available and, you know, how to use the facilities as we add more. And I think that'll be great. So I appreciate that.
Joanne?
Thank you. Just for information, Julie, when I met with Lori, I was concerned about the right-of-ways plant replacement because it took us years to get caught back up of dead plants that had been removed for years. And Lori did explain to me that you're looking at asset management and how these were just replaced. But I just say it to you specifically just because of history of what happened, and it took us so long to get it all replaced. And so I was just worried. I didn't want to see that happen to us again, 15 years from now, that we're like, oh, we need to go replace everything. And so that's why I had to say it. Thanks.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
All right, we'll go on to the ballpark fund portion of the Parks Department. They have a $4.8 million budget. That's their operating budget. They have 43.5 positions, 24 are full-time and 19.5 are part-time, and those part-time are primarily associated with spring training activities and some maintenance activities. They're responsible for the ballpark capital asset replacement, and that's the part of the portion that's required by the agreement with the teams. Their rolling stock, and some of those are in the parks plan. They have some capital project to do some safety repairs and concession areas improvements. I'll point out that the concession area improvements are fully funded by the concessionaire, so we'll be reimbursed for those. Their supplementals include some field maintenance and equipment dollars, some miscellaneous concrete repairs. It includes funding the development and creation of a new mascot, and it includes funding for the 10-year celebration, and that one also, half of the funding for the 10-year celebration expense is being paid for by the teams.
Joe?
Oops.
There's, I guess, about little over $400,000 that you're going to see in Public Works General Fund for maintenance for the ballpark supervisor and I guess a couple mechanics. Why is that not in the ballpark fund if it's going to be used for the ballpark?
The facilities supports the entire city, and right now they are using their current staff to help deal with the ballpark. Ultimately, if there was a desire, as we implement the new financial system, we could start charging the ballpark fund for their portion of the cost. But the intent that these positions would be dedicated to the ballpark, but they would be available to be pulled off if there were critical projects that had to happen elsewhere in the city. It may be that they want to do a mix of, it may be half of 3 people instead of 1 full person or something like that that provides these services.
You know, one of my concerns is always to capture true cost of the ballpark. Okay? That's what we remember had earlier discussions with police and fire when they worked the stadium events. When I read this one, it talked about these being dedicated to the ballpark. I think at some point when the system goes live, they need to be charged either in the fund originally or somehow get transferred over like the police and fire does, so we get the cost. Now, eventually, the general fund's going to cover it. I understand that, okay? But if it stays in here, the cost won't be captured in the ballpark. So somehow we got to get those costs over to the ballpark so we know the cost. But again, eventually it's going to end up in the general. But from an accounting standpoint, I think to do it right and for true transparency, it needs to be in there.
And Mayor, Councilmember Pizzillo, I'll also share with you, we have some inconsistency in how we charge facilities costs to different departments. So one of the projects that we will be undertaking in the coming year, or once we got the system up and we're doing our rate and fee study, is that we are going to look for other ways to charge facilities to all city departments. Okay. So that is a goal not only for the ballpark expense, but it's a goal for all city facilities.
Yeah, and I think it's an admirable goal because that way you get a true cost of what it's costing for each department. Again, can't get the accountant out of me, but that's what I think is important for us to be able to track this. Okay.
Thank you. Sherry?
I actually have one back from the parks, if I could. With regard to this, for the Mayor's Art Select program, it says it's usually through grant funding. I know we have a lot of people in the community here because Nathan. If that's something that wasn't funded, could we get notice of that? Because we've got the $134,000 sitting there to make sure that that program doesn't go away. That would be my concern.
Thank you.
We can, if the Parks Department notifies us, we can certainly bring forward an item, or they can come forward to council with an item asking to use city manager's contingency or some other funding source should that not come through.
Because I know it's very popular and people like to go enjoy the art. So.
Absolutely, we will come back and ask for those funds.
Because I know where there's 134,000 sitting.
And we do think that our first goal would be to retain sponsorship for those events, but if not, we will seek additional dollars from mayor and council.
So far, we haven't had to, so.
So far, we haven't had to.
Yeah. Been very successful. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, let's go.
All righty. Public Works. So Public Works is a big, complex department, so they have several slides, but we can still pause after different funding sources or however you'd like to go. Their general fund budget is $3.9 million. That includes their administrative functions, the facilities functions, and what's called portions of the program management function. There's 20 positions, 18 full-time and 2 existing part-time. The recommendation, as Councilman Pizzillo has already mentioned, is to add 3 maintenance positions to focus on the ballpark. That is an aging facility, and it is used year-round. There's also a recommendation to add a stormwater inspector position. We have a growing need to address stormwater. There's a recommendation to fund on a one-time basis a temporary facilities coordinator, primarily to kind of support some of the activities that are going on around the city. There is funding for a generator and bay door and gate maintenance programs, and a recommendation to fund batteries for the telecom UPS system. We're also exploring that project in the CIP in terms of the bigger project relative to that particular item. In terms of fleet, they have a $2.2 million budget with 7 positions, and they have responsibility for the Fleet Asset Management Fund, which is used to replace vehicles. They have a supplemental recommendation to add an electric charging station and an electric vehicle to break ourselves into that. I'm going to tell you also that as we come forward with the tentative budget, we're going to move, right now fleet is treated as an internal service fund. You'll see it change to being a general fund operation. It won't be any change in terms of its costs, will still be charged to the departments involved, but it's another one of those changes that we want to make as we're implementing the new system.
Questions? Go ahead.
All right, water, $8.1 million, 32 positions. Their supplementals include, we're working on a capital project at Site 12, and so this adds a tech position associated with that new O&M responsibility. There's bulk water purchase, consistent with some agreements the council has already seen earlier this year. There's a utility technician to address, general growth in the program in terms of wells and facilities. Some microwave radios for the SCADA system. Reverse osmosis membrane replacement is something that has been funded via small increases in their operating budget and trying to build up to the funding needed to do that. We're going to just do it the right way and put that in the CIP, so it's recommended for next year, and then the next replacement may be 5 years later or something like that, and it'll be programmed in the CIP each time that that's needed. And then there's half the funding for an IWMP for the North Waterman Wash area.
Joe?
Just a general question. A while back when we had the rate structure for the water, sewer, and sanitation, and I'll just cover them all, we had a certain growth pattern as far as our rates to cover certain improvements that we were planning on in the future. Is there anything in this budget significantly that's going to require us to look again at the rate structure a little earlier than what we had anticipated?
Mayor, council member, right now we're trending, we may not be adding exactly the same positions that were predicted in the rate study, but we're trending within the cost of the rate study.
Okay.
And I believe when we presented the surface water plant to you, we told you we would need to come forward with a rate study to support that in the future, but at this point in time, we're not anticipating having to do anything off the 5-year cycle.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, go ahead.
Wastewater is $5.7 million and 21 positions. The supplementals there include some utility increases associated with growing flows at the facilities. A utility tech position. I think earlier in the year, council is familiar that there was a need to create a position for pretreatment. So this is returning that position as a result. There's some additional pretreatment program contract assistance. This is to go towards the next tier of businesses. It's not the current effort. There's media for odor scrubbers, and then there's the other half of the funding for the IWMP.
Questions? Joanne?
Can you explain the $3,000 APS time-sensitive reimbursement? What that was?
That project, when the supplementals were initially submitted, there was a belief that APS was going to require us to do some maintenance on that facility. APS, it's the connection to the line to the power plant for effluent. subsequent to the supplemental being requested, APS has changed their scheduling for that particular project. I don't know if Public Works, if you have any more of an update beyond that.
Mayor, Councilmember Osborne, yeah, we were looking at several options for the future of the connection into a effluent line that comes from the 91st Avenue plant. It delivers that effluent to the APS plant down in Palo Verde. So one of the options was to do some repairs on that line. A second option is just to disconnect from that line altogether, looking at what the options would be. We are looking at other things as well, but we are working with APS at delaying the schedule to give us some time to think about what the best decision will be.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, go forth.
Public Works Sanitation, $7.1 million budget with 9 positions. We're recommending a supplemental to add a bulk crew. We believe with the addition of that bulk crew, we can cover the needs of some of the other supplementals that were requested and be able to keep up with the schedule. So that's where we are with them.
Questions? Sherry? No?
Oh, no, I'm fine.
No? All right, go ahead.
Public Works, just to kind of go over their major CIP projects, obviously the surface water project, probably the biggest project the city's doing, and pretty exciting out there. The ongoing manhole replacement program has continued. That was part of the rate study. The Site 12 improvements and capacity increase, that's what we mentioned that we're adding the O&M expenses for. They've taken the 2 wells that were currently planned for either repair or rehab need to be closed, so they're building a new well 26. There's a disc filter replacement and then a study of the sewer pipes in quarter section 59.
Okay. Questions? Go ahead.
All righty. So that is the run through of high level of the budget and some of the details on the individual department budgets. In terms of where we are right now, the next steps in the process would be that we can come back at next week's meeting to answer some of the questions and address some of the issues that have been raised today. After that, we are continuing to work on reviewing the carryovers, as I mentioned earlier, and we'll bring those forward with the tentative when we raise the tentative adoption. We do have a budget open house scheduled on May 3rd from 6 to 7 at the City Hall. Last year, we changed to an open house format from the prior budget forum approach, and we got a fairly good response to that, so we want to repeat that this year.
Very good is limited, so very good was not, what was the number in very good? Does anybody remember?
I don't remember.
We're just kind of briefing the new city manager that isn't a lot of people, but maybe we can do some extra advertising this year or something extra that might help.
We'll definitely leverage social media and get the word out to try to generate some community interest.
Ice cream social.
Party.
Yeah, maybe food.
Big food.
We'd have to ask for more money in the budget to do that. We had also, in addition, if we still, after next week's meeting, we are still not where we need to be with you, we can schedule another work session before we move into the formal adoption steps of the tentative and the publications, and then the formal adoption and the public hearings associated with the property tax, and then the property tax levy at the end of June.
And lastly, I'm assuming that Councilman Stiff sent questions in and has been talking about the budget.
That's correct. As he indicated at the last meeting, he wasn't going to be able to attend the hearings, but he's remaining very engaged, and we're working with him on answering some of his questions.
Okay, great. All right. So, questions? All right. They're very comfortable with it. You did a great job. Thank you. Thank you, staff. I'm ready to ask, though, that this week, if you could, if you have any more questions or concerns, could you please send them in to the office so they can be prepared ahead of time? Okay? All right. Let me just see here. So, let's see when our next meeting is. Well, it doesn't tell me that, so I'm just going to adjourn this meeting and say to
Mayor,
staff.
wait, just
Yes.
one moment.
Oh.
I would like to also.
Oh, yes. Joanne, thank you. So we just want to mention, I don't know how many of you knew Councilman Souza, but he was on the council when I was elected. And he passed away this week at age 91. But I have to tell you, he was on the council in his 80s, his last terms, right, Rory? He was always a great council person. We came very close towards the latter part of his terms because he became pro-City Hall. And so he was my advocate. So when he left the council, it was certainly a loss to me, not only for the friendship, but for that. So he served from 1999 to 2011. Just want you to know that those that did not know him, he was a class act. He was very sophisticated, and he was smart, and he contributed a great deal to the city of Goodyear, and I greatly appreciate his friendship and his professionalism. So we couldn't go tonight. It's a little late for the services, and all of us were unable to attend, but I just want to send prayers and thoughts to his family and let them know how much he was loved and how much he helped for the city of Goodyear, and I think that's a great legacy. Yes, Jerry?
Yeah, I was thinking about that when I read that. You know, in memory, we have a new rec center coming on, and there's going to be plazas and benches and parks that maybe we have people who are long-serving. We consider, you know, naming a plaza or a little park area or something for these people that have served decades. You know, I mean.
Well, we have a number of mayors that are on that wall that we certainly could, you know.
Or a wall for all of them, because
Yeah.
we don't really have a place where the public can learn some of our history and see these people that have served a long time and see their contribution.
Right. Great.
Can I?
Okay, so,
wait,
yes,
can I add?
I'm sorry, Joanne,
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, I just wanted to, because there are so many new people, staff members to our city and just citizens that Mr. Sousa definitely was a class act. He did have a sense of humor to him also, and if you got him riled up, you think, I get riled up? Oh, he would get riled up. But one thing that people might not really know is that the one Goodyear sign, he's the man that if you didn't say you were in Goodyear and Goodyear wasn't in the sign, ooh, he would get mad. And you think I was a sign Nazi? He was even worse. So, however, the one thing that was always still showing is the Goodyear welcome sign that as you're headed north down Litchfield Road that has all the flowers in front of it. That was because of him. He couldn't stand seeing those welcome signs sitting out there with nothing around it, just in the dirt. And that little flower bed is because of Dick Sousa. So.
Well, great. Thank you for honoring him tonight. So, City Manager, do you have any summary or current events or anything you need to inform us on?
Certainly a lot of follow-up from this evening's meeting.
Okay.
I don't think I'll recap all of that now, but
Yeah.
trust we have lots of
Yeah,
good notes,
you
and we'll
didn't
bring
have enough time to write it all
we'll bring
down.
the information back for you. If you want some current events, I can just give you a couple of highlights from events over the weekend. They did give me something here. So just to recap, we had the Volunteer Appreciation Event, which was held. It was the 11th annual volunteer event, my first one clearly, and it was very classy. I thought it was very well done. We had approximately 200 volunteers who attended the evening, and of course, we had talked about they collectively served over 32,820 volunteer hours. And that was worth over $782,000 in dollar value to the city, so very special. We did have the fourth and final public input meeting on the Goodyear Recreation Campus, and we had over 100 attendees come and participate in that open house, so that was wonderful. And so during your work session on April 23rd, you'll receive a formal update on that plan. And then last but not least, the Goodyear Lakeside Music Fest was also held this weekend. And my comments here, even with soaring temperatures, the event drew nearly 6,000 people during that event. So I think overall very successful.
Great. Well, congratulations for staff on that Anything else, council? All right, I'm going to adjourn this. Joe?
No, I was going to say the mayor's big dog run was a lot of fun. Got to circle the PIR, got to take the motorcycle out on the track, got to go down Luke.
Yeah, well, you can mention the other mayor that rode on the back of a motorcycle.
Yeah, no, Anna Tovar wasn't on my motorcycle. She was
That's
on
all I've
somebody
heard
else's.
today.
Yes, that she was on somebody else's motorcycle. So, always got room for you, Mayor. You know that.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was a blast. Had a great time.
All right, great. Anything else? All right, this meeting is adjourned.